everybody, it's Romania Black. Look, I am recording ahead, but I had my moderator be happy go through some of the comments for a ways back, but I didn't get through all of them, so I'll probably be able to record even further ahead when I get to the other comments, but I can't stop now. I'm on the roller coaster because we're on volume 2 of Scum Villain Self-Saving System, and I can't get off now. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to this series. I want to record ahead. I'm already seeing, because I have quite a few comments to get through before we start, that there are a lot of people that are making notions and comments about things that will be talked about in the future reactions. So I feel like a time traveler going back and telling those people, yes, your comments will be addressed. It just may take a bit for me to get to them. But oh my gosh, as of this week, we're going to be a little bit over the halfway point, which is going to be crazy. This week we're going over the halfway point and tipping into the latter half of volume 2, which is mind-blowing to me that by the time we get into September, we're going to be in volume 3. What? I feel like because there's only 4 volumes, it makes the series go by so much faster, but because I'm addicted and want to read ahead, it makes it go by that much faster as well. So it's kind of mind-boggling to me, if I'm honest, but we have a few Feral fandom entries to talk about, and we have some comments as well. There's been a lot of Feral fandom entries. We might as well go ahead and talk about them that I'm not going to put on here. Most of them are just of Luo Binghe and Shen Qingqiu as sheep or something cute and cuddly. They're trying to, I feel like as I'm recording this, I am starting volume 2, so that gives you kind of a mindset of where I'm at. And it feels like everybody in the Discord is trying to be like, hey, Romania, I know you're about to go through some shit, so here's some really cute Luo Binghe and Shen Qingqiu things to kind of take the edge off. And I'm like, They don't even know. I feel like with part 11, when I was looking at chapters 34 through 36, I was a mess. And we haven't gotten to that on Patreon or YouTube yet, so heaven help us. I'm dreading looking at those comments. But I know my moderator will have me in a good place. So I do want to point out this dichotomy of we show Luo Binghe as the sweet little lamb, the little white lotus, feeding the sheep. And that does get to the idea that at his heart, Luo Binghe is a kind soul. He's just very, very emotional. Very emotional, and he doesn't have control of his emotions right now. I said it on Discord, and somebody was like, yep, that's it. And I was like, Luo Binghe is going through his horny puberty teenage phase and doesn't know what to do with his emotions, and Shen Qingqiu has no clue it's happening. It's like, yep, that's basically the dynamic. But I do like that at his core, Luo Binghe is a kind person. He's just very confused, very angry, and he's making some poor decisions. But he just, what can he do? And then below that, I liked that this little demon baby Luo Binghe is not only just kind of like Microsoft Paint quality-esque, but his little demonic thing looks like a heart. His little demon crest looks like a heart. And I was like, well, that's kind of cute. It also looks like a broken heart, so make that what you will. But honestly, you all know the meme where it's the guy on the beach and it's like different superimposed images of him. Like at one point he's like having the sand slip through his fingers, and another point he's like got his arms in the air and whatever. I recreated that meme for the thumbnail of my last Attack on Titan anime reaction and recap. But this image right here of Shen Qingqiu, I want to recreate that at some point. I don't know what I will recreate it for. If it's the live stream, if whatever happens, I want to recreate it at some point because it's absolutely amazing. But I love that. I love Gabadoodle saying, Shen Qingqiu posering, calm on the outside, disaster millennial internally. A disaster millennial. That is amazing, and I relate so hardcore to it. Maybe that's why I relate to Shen Qingqiu. We're both disaster millennials. So I thought that was really, really fun. I liked both of those, so thank you. But let's dive into these comments. So I didn't know this, but it's been brought up in the comments way earlier than this week. But apparently the combination, I talked about Complain last week. What a way to start. What a way to start. I talked about that. I thought it was the nickname. I thought it was like a nickname for Shang Qinghua. No, it's like a ship name for Cucumber Bro. and airplane shooting towards the sky is come plane. Well, that's fun. I feel like such a dirty teacher saying it. I'm like telling my kids, like, do you know about this phrase? And they're like, yeah, you're late on the bandwagon, teach. Anyway, this wasn't a comment, but something that I just kind of thought about as I was going back and editing the reaction from last week, thinking about how Xinyan, he is similar to Luo Binghe in the fact of their upbringing and the idea possibly of intergenerational trauma. And not necessarily Xinyan, but Shen Qingqiu, who he's inhabiting, is this idea of intergenerational trauma. And that the original Shen Qingqiu was, you know, he was mainly mean to Luo Binghe because he had been, you know, abused by the Chu family. And then Shen Qingqiu's original, his meanness rubbed off on Ming Fan, which rubbed off to others. And then it was basically violent begets violence. And Luo Binghe, he was, you know, ended up being violent towards Shen Qingqiu because that's all he knew, because that's all Shen Qingqiu knew. And it was just this intergenerational trauma situation. But now, since since Xinyan is inhabiting Shen Qingqiu, that intergenerational trauma, it's kind of been disconnected. It was been severed, and Shen Qingqiu hasn't carried on that trauma to Ming Fan and therefore to Luo Binghe. So Luo Binghe is still confused because he doesn't know why Shen Qingqiu is afraid of him, and Shen Qingqiu is just, he doesn't realize this whole intergenerational trauma business, but he might after last chapter set when he saw Xinyan and was like, wait, maybe that woman wasn't telling the full truth, and there was something else to his backstory, and maybe he'll bring it up in the trial, and Luo Binghe will realize that he can connect to Shen Qingqiu and understand why Shen Qingqiu did the things that he did because they have a similar backstory. We'll just have to wait and see if that happens. But I was like, oh, that could be the case. We'll just see about that. So who knows? But that was just something that came to me in the editing. I was like, oh, that could be a thing that happens. Latoria Falex 5576 said, noting how Shen Qingqiu and Shang Qinghua both have dick jokes as their handles, meaning they're more alike than not. Now, I still think that Xinyan is way more oblivious and not maybe not as in denial as Shang Qinghua is, but maybe Shang Qinghua is oblivious too. Maybe, I feel like in Modao Zushi, Wei Wuxian's character kind of, he faked being oblivious, but he was actually more in denial than being oblivious. Shi Lian was a great combination of obliviousness and denial. I think Xinyan is pure obliviousness. Shang Qinghua, is he a mix of denial and obliviousness? Is it more denial? Is it more obliviousness? We don't know a whole lot about his character yet, so we'll just have to wait and see. But I thought that was good to point out. Imgravis 4543. I loved this motto that you said, and it's going to be the motto of this series from here on in. Live, laugh, lay down, and internalize the pain. I need that on a cross stitch. I need live, laugh, lay down, and internalize the pain on a cross stitch. I need that. I will hang it up in my home. I need it. I laughed out loud for a solid like 30 seconds. I was living. So thank you. Way3845 note that this is, I'm assuming, a fan theory. The moderators let it pass, so I'm assuming it's just a fan theory. It's not been confirmed, deconfirmed. It broke my heart, though. And that was, some believe that it took several days for the system to send Shen Qingqiu the notification about the heartbreak points at the end of Volume 1 because Luo Binghe was holding on to a slim hope in the abyss, waiting for Shen Qingqiu to come and save him. That broke my heart. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I was like, oh my God. But yeah, it does make sense. And it does add up. But I'm like, it also makes sense of why Luo Binghe also feels so betrayed. Because he's like, I sat there and waited for you to come save me. If you didn't hate me, why didn't you come save me? And meanwhile, Shen Qingqiu thought that this was just the way things had to be. I don't think it crossed his mind that he could go and save him. Of course, I would love it if both these characters talked about that, but they don't want to. And it's like, yeah. So thank you, Wei, for giving me that thought and crushing my soul. But yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think Luo Binghe, part of the reason he didn't come back, he's like, well, you didn't come save me, so I just figured you didn't like me anymore. And it's like, Anime Annie talks about Shen Qingqiu reading the text during his 3 years leading up to the timeline here in volume 2. It shows how he still likes reading fiction. So he's still like, he's still Shen Yan inhabiting Shen Qingqiu's body. So he's like, well, I'm in this fictional world. I might as well read up on what's going on. But also, as a bonus, it enables him to level up, quote unquote, in regards to knowledge and understanding the world that he lives in. So it's kind of like a win-win for Shen Qingqiu. He gets to like feed his inner otaku and learn about this world that he's inhabiting and that he's been obsessed with for who knows how many millions of chapters, but he also gets to kind of level up in the world itself. I'm wondering if Shen Qingqiu has done that himself, because as the author, you'd think he'd remember a lot of this stuff, but he doesn't seem to remember some of his own plot points. So it's going to be interesting to see what we get on Shen Qingqiu as we go through this series. And then finally, Generation Wumbo talks about MXTX writing Confrontations as a halfway point between a horror movie and running into someone unexpectedly at the grocery store. And they were talking about that first encounter of Luo Binghe and Shen Qingqiu being like, oh, hey, you're here. Huh. I would say that Isayama in Attack on Titan is very similar in his interactions, and it's purely for like shock value. It's so understated that you're like, oh, this is happening now? And then it just happens and you're like, I wasn't prepared. That's literally MXTX as well. So, but yeah, I really appreciate those comments. These are not all of the comments from that chapter set, so I am going to go back and look at more of them, presumably so I can record ahead. But I wanted to go ahead and record this set of chapters, and so I told the moderator, I'm like, I just want to look at what comments are on there now, and I'll go back and see the other ones later, and they were like, okay. So, I super appreciate y'all. This series, I'm hooked, and I want to go ahead and read ahead in it, so thank you for being patient with me, and I will get to everybody's comments, don't you worry. It maybe is a good thing for my moderators to know that I am recording somewhat ahead, because it makes it to where I can read more comments, because I'm not worried about spoilers, so it's kind of a win-win in an odd way. But we're going to be looking today at chapters 43 through 45, pages 144 to 190. I'm super excited. But we got to have a dream world. Shen Qingqiu is off to go get that damn mushroom, whatever it's going to do. Is he going to run into any else? But first, we have to get through this wine bar where he's been confronted by Mingfan and Ning Yingying, who are standing up for him. They don't realize he's there, but things look like they're about to like hit a turning point and escalate. And it's like, what is he going to do to de-escalate the situation? I don't know. We're just going to have to find out. But I hope you all enjoy this chapter set and reaction and discussion. We're going to get started here with Scum Villain Self-Saving System in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh! Part 8! Death! Thought we already went through that. I thought that was towards the end. Damn it, MXTX. Damn it! At first glance, this disciple looked rather ordinary. They were mixed in with the crowd of Huanhua Palace disciples, hunched over and huddling close, gaze flickering around. Shen Qingqiu only noticed him because his face was one color, his neck another, and his hands yet 2 more different hues. Furthermore, within this agitated mob where everyone's blood was running hot, he didn't draw his sword or cry out for a fight, nor did he glance or glare at the offending party with furious eyes. Instead, he brushed back and forth through the Huanhua Palace disciples with his head down, looking just like a pickpocket taking advantage of the ruckus. As far as Shen Qingqiu knew, only one type of person acted like this. While Mingfan was in mid-clash, sword ringing and clanging, he looked back and cried, "Zhao Shimei! Shimei, how are you?" Ning Yingying had halted for a while, like the slap had stunned her silly. Now she finally came back to her senses. Her face was half red, half white, expression furious and eyes teary, but she brandished her sword to fight back. She'd suffered this humiliation because she'd been momentarily soft-hearted. This time, she would show no mercy whatsoever. The shop's interior descended into a massive brawl. To the side, Shen Qingqiu saw an old cat lazily curl its tail, licking its fur in the sunlight. I like that this brawl's going on and he's distracted by a cat. He scooped it up with a single hand and tossed it into the tavern. Surprised, the old cat screeched and darted back and forth between the 2 fighting camps. Oh! Shen Qingqiu lowered his head and followed it, slipping into the circle of battle. What a great way to distract! Just be like, here, focus on this cat, not me. Save Bandit! Once this strange person had mysteriously pushed into the fray, both sides paused. Afraid to harm an innocent, Ning Yingying hesitated slightly, but the little palace mistress didn't have such reservations. Picking her whip back up, she lashed out as before. Oh, this was the other end of chapter 42. What? Shen Qingqiu chased the old cat back and forth through the hall, calling the name he'd given it on the spot. In the midst of this chaos, Ning Yingying's hands were obviously tied, especially as she was afraid to make a careless move. Yet as she kept feeling as if someone was lifting her elbow, then like someone was pushing her shoulder, it was as if she didn't move. When she didn't move her sword, it danced, throwing off silvery light. Suddenly, 2 smacks rang out, and the little palace mistress held her face, dumbstruck and petrified like a wooden chicken, frozen on the spot. Those 2 slaps had been much louder and sharper than the one she had delivered to Ning Yingying's face. Everyone in both camps had seen Ning Yingying's arms flying, slapping first with one hand and then the other, giving the little palace mistress 2 smacks in the face. In tacit agreement, they all stopped where they were. Oh, okay. All right, nice. So, I'm sorry. I don't know why Scum Villain Self-Saving System chooses to, in the middle of a chapter, have a whole new section open up. It's like just in the chapter and then start the new section. So apologies. I just assumed when I saw part 8, I just stopped last week and was like, okay, no, that's a new chapter. All right. So sorry about that. I'm sure I'm going to get a million comments being like, you didn't finish chapter 42. And I'm going to have to put a note on last week's video. Ming Fan cheered. Oh, Zhao Shimei, nice hit. Chapter 43. No, that actually wasn't me, Ning Yingying said weakly. So, Shen Qingqiu slapped for her, right? Good on you, Shen Qingqiu. Don't be scared, it's already done, Ming Fan said encouragingly. Everyone knows she started it. You were considerate enough not to hurt her, and she responded with a sneak attack. Serves her right. So, see, Shen Qingqiu's like, let's just stop this so that you don't get hurt, and she learns a lesson, and everybody's like, well, serves her right. Yep. The crowd of Xi Peak disciples agreed one after another. The little palace mistress's tears glistened. You dared to hit me. Not even my daddy's ever hit me. Well, no, it wasn't really me. It was you, Ming Fan cut in, scoffing. Remember when Qingjing Peak's disciples are bullied? We must return it twofold. If we don't hit back, we'll betray all of Shizun's lessons. Shen Qingqiu internally cheered together with the disciples. Good boy, Ming Fan had earnestly taken his teachings to heart. Yes, 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 grudges must be repaid in just this way. Stealthily, Shen Qingqiu slipped into the group of Huanhua disciples and finally caught the old cat, which was still howling and screeching. Regardless of how stupid a person might be, they could still see that something was off with him. While cupping her 2 red, terribly cumbersome-looking swollen cheeks, the little palace mistress glared at him, filled with resentment. Hey, who exactly are you? Who would dare mess with me just like this? The Huanhua palace disciples surrounded him, yelling, The old palace mistress is asking you a question. Shen Qingqiu bent over and released the cat. Then he straightened and pointed to the disciple who stood hunched and lurking in the back. Instead, why don't you ask who exactly is he? All at once, every one of those gazes focused on that person. The little palace mistress was still in a rage, so at first she only gave the indicated disciple a sideways glance, but the more she looked, the stranger she found him. Leaving Shen Qingqiu alone for a while, or for now, she turned to the odd disciple and said suspiciously, Who are you? What are you doing dressed like that? Are you really from our Hua Huan Palace? Why have I never seen you before? The disciple mumbled but couldn't manage a reply. The little palace mistress turned to her subordinates. Well, what about you? Do you recognize him? Realizing things weren't looking good, the disciple made an eerie sound, which made everyone turn their blades on him. Don't get close, Shen Qingqiu warned with a raised voice. At the same time, he plucked another leaf, then flicked his wrist and sent it forth. This time, both Ning Yingying and Ming Fan saw the way that the leaf flew, and they balked. Enveloped in a sword's glare's glow, the leaf pierced through the air and sliced open the strange disciple's outer robe, cleaving through his clothes to reveal the skin underneath. At this, it was like everyone had seen a ghost, and they backed up several steps. Some even went farther, shrieking as they leapt out of the tavern, scarlet-covered skin. It was in perfect accord with Shen Qingqiu's guess. To his knowledge, only one type of entity held themselves with that posture, a sower disguised as a normal person. Only the usually exposed parts of the sower's skin had been painted to resemble the hue of an ordinary person, so the sower's cover was blown on the spot. As such, it decided it had nothing to lose and rushed forth with a yell, eyes bloodshot. These disciples were young juniors. Most of them hadn't gone on the most recent excursion to Jinlan City. Therefore, they'd only heard of this monster and never seen it. Now that a real one had appeared before them, and one that was madly grabbing at whatever it saw, they were all scared senseless. When the sower threw itself towards a Qijing Peak disciple, Shen Qingqiu flashed between them and planted a foot in the sower's chest, sending it flying through 2 tables and spewing fresh blood everywhere. He turned his head to yell at the group, "Hurry up and leave!" Instead, Ning Yingying latched onto him, crying and laughing. "Oh, Shazoon, is it you, Shazoon? Oh, no, wait, my face is covered in dirt and whiskers and you still recognize me? I mean, let's be real. Was that disguise any more than just putting glasses on?" Shen Qingqiu was very slightly moved. However, in this kind of situation, choosing not to leave and on top of that staying behind to be a burden, and moreover calling out his true identity despite his disguise, as expected, she was still dumb. When the sower tenaciously threw itself towards them again, refusing to relent, Shen Qingqiu pushed Ning Yingying away with a hand as gentle as a spring. Then, with the other hand as harsh as winter, he flicked a fire technique at the enemy. It didn't hit. No, the fire didn't even come out. The fountain of blood that had remained dormant and hidden in Shen Qingqiu's throat for many years once again began to stir. He'd had enough of this without a cure, the poison that just loved dropping the ball at key moments. He snapped his fingers continuously over and over again, but not a single flame sprang forth. Like a lighter out of lighter fluid, he clicked away, but there were no sparks no matter how he snapped. While Shen Qingqiu became flustered, the sower lunged and latched onto his thigh. Shen Qingqiu was struck speechless. He unthinkingly raised his misfortune-plagued right hand. Naturally, he had already detected 3 red patches happily taking root and growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Well, not fair! Why am I infected so fast every time? Perhaps his rage and sorrow alchemized into a fuse, because with his last snap, an explosive burst of flames finally ignited between his fingers. With a kick, Shen Qingqiu sent the sower clinging to his thigh flying, and he struck down over the palm alight with raging flames. The sower was engulfed in a blaze of fire and a series of horrible shrieks. Ning Yingying and Mingfan tearfully sandwiched Shen Qingqiu on his left and right. "Shazoon!" The other Qijing Peak disciples were about to join in, but they quickly retreated under their Shazoon's go outside and run 500 laps glare. Since his disguise was already awash, Shen Qingqiu scrubbed and wiped at his face until he recovered his original appearance. "Was anyone infected?" he asked. Then, with a heartfelt tone, he finally said a line he'd always dreamed of saying. "Hurry and take some medicine. You must not stop taking your medication." One female and male voice, one high and one low, sobbed in his ears. "Shazoon, we finally found you. Shazoon, this disciple missed you so much it hurt." "You must not stop taking your medication" originated as a slogan to encourage people with depression to not stop taking their medication. The phrase was later co-opted as internet slang as a way to say, "There's something wrong with you." Oh! And him wanting to, be the guy to say that line to them. Shen Qingqiu hadn't even replied when a cold feeling lanced down his back. He pushed aside his 2 disciples and sent Zhuya flying out of the folds of his robes. With a clang, his blade blocked the little Palace Mistress's refined iron whip. If the little Palace Mistress could have been considered only temporarily enraged during the recent altercation with Qijing Peak, then this time her actions truly brimmed with killing intent. She hacked away with the short whip in her hand like it was a knife or an axe, every move vicious and desperate. "Are you mad?" Shen Qingqiu asked bluntly. "Where does all this rage come from every day?" He'd long wanted to ask that question. "You wicked villain," the little Palace Mistress shouted. "Return the lives of my Xizhong and Shiji." At first, Shen Qingqiu thought she was once again grieving the Huanhua Palace disciples who died during the Immortal Alliance Conference. He would never have guessed what the little Palace Mistress screamed next. "Just because Ma Xizhong said some harsh things to you while you were being imprisoned, he died so horribly, so horribly." Who's Ma Xizhong? Could it be that nasty, sarcastic, pockmarked guy? This Shen didn't take a single life when leaving Huanhua Palace, he said. So why are you telling me that he died horribly? He then turned to his disciples to whisper, did he really died? How horrible was it? He really did die, Mingfan answered, also quiet. He was utterly, utterly horrible. His entire body was green and decayed. They say it was highly toxic demonic poison. Toxic demonic poison, well, that sounded very much like Luo Binghe's handiwork. Quibbling is useless, the little palace mistress said. Today, for the deaths of my Huanhua Palace disciples, I absolutely must make you pay with your life. This Shen has never been good with poison, and there are hundreds upon thousands of ways to kill your Huanhua Palace disciples, Shen Qingqiu countered. Why would I choose the most cumbersome strategy? I did indeed escape from prison, but how could you prove I killed them? Then can you prove you didn't kill them? A Huanhua Palace disciple shouted. If Shen Qingqiu didn't untangle this, he was afraid that in the future, the two sects wouldn't ever be able to let this matter rest. He deliberated a little, and then probed further. What does your esteemed sect's head disciple Gong Yi Zhao have to say about the matter? The little palace mistress's eyes went wide. The tears that had originally stopped started to fall once more. You still dare mention Gong Yi Zhang? She raised her whip and pointed at Shen Qingqiu. You think that just because he's dead and can't testify, that you can use him however you wish? Shen Qingqiu felt like he'd been struck by lightning. He caught her whip mid-strike between two fingers. He'd hoped he'd heard wrong. What did you say? Gong Yi Zhao died. When did this happen? Who did it? Even in the original work, the worst part of Gong Yi Zhao's fate had been an assignment to Huanhua Palace's border territories, where he became a trivial character. Who did it? The little palace mistress asked savagely. You still have the face to ask who did it? Huanhua Palace's disciples surrounded Shen Qingqiu, robes rustling. Surely Luo Binghe didn't kill both of them because he was jealous. Kill this despicable villain, the little palace mistress ordered. Take revenge for Gong Yi Zhang and for the Ziyang and Shiji who are guarding the water prison. Satisfy their grudges. Shen Qingqiu's heart went cold. Could Luo Binghe really have slaughtered every last one of the disciples guarding the water prison, including Gong Yi Zhao? And was the loss of those hundreds of lives being blamed on him instead? Stupid brat. You don't get it regardless of what we say, Ning Yingying said angrily. Don't you see my Shizun doesn't know? Without hesitation, Qi Jinping's disciples entered the fray as well. However, swords have no eyes. So lest Shen Qingqiu wanted to be stabbed, he had no time for careful thought. As this fight wouldn't end if they continued as they were, he leapt out of the tavern, lightly calling back, "Come on out!" As he hoped, both camps followed him after him rather than go for one another, every disciple trying to squeeze out the door first. But as soon as Shen Qingqiu made it to the main street, he was dumbfounded. A long row of cultivators dressed in various colors were waiting there, ready for battle, glaring like tigers eyeing their prey. Well, fair enough. After all, they'd made such a large commotion in the tavern. It would be pretty unscientific if they failed to draw the attention of other people, right? With a light push of his foot, Shen Qingqiu's steps skimmed the roof tiles, and he landed on the eaves with a flip. He took a deep breath and then yelled from the pit of his stomach, "Oh, Liu Mingyan!" Someone flew up on their sword and angrily denounced him. Shen Qingqiu, your heart is truly wicked. You purposely fled to this city, drawing people from various sects here. Was it so you could collude with demons and in one fell swoop reenact the tragedy of the Immortal Alliance Conference? Whatever it takes, our Bai Chi sect won't let you succeed. So any and all accusations are perfectly acceptable, huh? Shen Qingqiu wasn't even in the mood to rant. Then, from the east came a hiss of a sword glare, followed by a person in white who arrived on a sword fast as lightning. Mind you, his descent was too forceful, pointlessly whipping up a powerful wind that threw the Ba Chi cultivator right off his blade. Liu Mingyan stood securely on Changlan with his arms crossed. What is it? Oh my god! Too reliable, great master Liu! Shen Qingqiu said with all sincerity, "Get me out of here." Liu Mingyan stared. My poison flared up again, and I can't summon the chi to fly my sword. If you don't take me, I'll just plummet from the skies. Liu Mingyan let out a sigh. Get on. Last week, I forgot that his sword's name was Changlan. I forgot that was his sword, so I was like, okay, now it all makes sense. The crowd gathered to watch from below, berated them without rest, saying things like, Sangjiang Mountain abets and shelters evil. The Baizan Peak and Shijing Peak wallow together in filth. But they both pretended they couldn't hear. Changlan soared into the sky, the wind whistling in their ears, leaving the 10 or so cultivators who chased them on swords far behind. Where to? Asked Liu Qingqiu. I can imagine Luo Binghe is going to take this in all the wrong ways. To the roof of the tallest building in the city, said Shen Qingqiu. After that, please help me hold off these people. What exactly is up with you? If you didn't wish to be imprisoned, why didn't you say so earlier? You've made saying things so troublesome. Besides, even if Sangjiang Mountain couldn't navigate the water prison, couldn't we have just destroyed it? That there was no need to destroy the water prison. Get off. I'm only saying that there was no need. I'm still grateful for your kindness, so surely there's no need to throw me down. Something's coming. Shen Qingqiu didn't say another word and jumped off at once. The tip of his foot touched the tile and he stood over the roof of the building. Changlan's momentum was incredibly powerful. Liu Qingqiu and his sword did a dazzling somersault in midair, and only then did he manage to break, eyes fixed attentively somewhere else. Shen Qingqiu also followed his gaze. Then he heard a sneer behind him. Where are you looking? Shen Qingqiu nearly stumbled on the spot. That "you just wait and see" hadn't just been talked. Then again, since when had anything about Luo Binghe been just talk? He'd actually come to capture him, even braving the risk of Jinmo's recoil. How deep did his resentment run? Luo Binghe glared fixedly at them, expression dark, then slowly extended a hand to Shen Qingqiu. Come with me. Gong Yizhao is dead, said Shen Qingqiu. Luo Binghe went rigid. The disciples guarding the water prison are also dead, he continued. Luo Binghe over 100 Huanhua Palace lives. Also, I'd be hated and persecuted. Was it really worth it? Red flashed in Luo Binghe's pupils. Whatever, you won't believe me regardless of what I say, he said icily. What? Then there's no need for more pointless chatter. I'll ask again, will you come or not? Well, why don't you just, if they're not really dead, or if you didn't kill them, why won't you say something? Defend yourself, Luo Binghe. He stubbornly refused to withdraw that hand. Shen Qingqiu had yet to answer when out of nowhere, over 10 people appeared, hemming them on the roof while riding their swords. Their leader was again that man from Baqi's sect. This time he'd lowered his center of gravity, basically crouched in horse stance upon his sword to prevent himself from being thrown off balance again. He shouted brashly, Shen Qingqiu is ours. No one else should even think of. Luo Binghe abruptly turned his head and yelled, beat it. He hadn't even drawn his sword, but from his body a powerful blast of spiritual energy burst forth, and a shrill, whistling shriek filled the ears of everyone on the scene. Every last one of the pursuers, along with their swords, was shoved over to fall several meters away, half of them slammed into the walls of pillars, coughing up fresh blood. The Baqi sect had met someone genuinely badass with an overbearing chi, and they had been wiped out to the last. The remaining spectators were all terrified. This black-clothed young man's cultivation was undeniably spectacular. How come so few of them had heard of him before? Liu Qingqiu pushed Shen Qingqiu. Go, do what you need to do. Can you handle this by yourself? Shen Qingqiu asked. 5 to 2. He hadn't forgotten those numbers. He'd only called Liu Qingqiu over to help him fight Small Fry and give him a lift along the way, not suddenly meet an unfortunate end. But neither of these two characters were the sort to in any way listen to the other. At the first wrong word, no wait, without even a word, they started to fight. Changlan was incredibly powerful, but Luo Binghe didn't even draw his sword. He concentrated spiritual energy in his hand and used his open palm like a blade to meet it head on. Shen Qingqiu knew why Luo Binghe couldn't draw his sword. In a duel between masters, one couldn't afford a single error, and this was the sort of moment when it was easiest for Shen Mo to take advantage of an opening and invade its wielder's mind. If Luo Binghe was possessed with demonic chi in plain view of everyone and his homicidal urges greatly increased, drawing the blade wouldn't be worth it. Luo Binghe's body actually housed 2 sects of cultivation systems, one with spiritual chi and one with demonic chi. Because his dual heritage had successfully integrated, these 2 systems didn't interfere with one another, each operating in excellent form. When necessary, his left and right hands could even use 2 different attack types simultaneously in a display of power. Well, of course, he's the protagonist. Why wouldn't he be OP in that regard? But right now, he couldn't draw his sword, and his circumstances made it inconvenient for him to access his demonic chi. Thus, his killing power was diminished. So for once, he and Liu Qingqiu were evenly matched. So did he kill Gong Yizhao through Jinmo and it was an accident? Or is Gong Yizhao not dead and he's just like imprisoned him somewhere? What about the pockmarked disciple? They found his body, but what about Gong Yizhao? Did he kill Gong Yizhao? Did he kill the... Why doesn't he say things? Deafening sounds shook the sky above the roof, white arcs and spiritual energy exploding together. Their duel was so fierce that none of the cultivators below them dared to rush in recklessly. Even the most inexperienced and undiscerning rookie could see that if one were to so much graze either man's roiling murderous chi, they'd ascend right to heaven without any further need to cultivate. Their fight was so fierce that Shen Qingqiu actually felt an answering urge. If not for Without a Cure having flared up at such an inopportune moment, he too would have wanted to enter the fray. But it was time. He squinted at the sky and then leapt to the highest level of the building. On the highest roof, a gale screamed. It felt like it could blow him right off. Luo Binghe saw this from afar and was seized by impatience. No longer in the mood to fight, the malevolence in his eyes skyrocketed and he reached for the hilt of the longsword on his back. He's actually going so far as to draw his sword here? Luo Binghe, don't be rash! Shen Qingqiu called in a rush. Too late, Luo Binghe said harshly. With a flip of his wrist, Jinmo was drawn, wreathed in a dark, billowing chi visible to the naked eye. Changlan stabbed straight towards Luo Binghe. He gently flicked Jinmo's blade edge, which was as thin as a cicada's wing. From the center oozed wave after wave of something like a chill, and Changlan came to a complete uncanny stop in midair. Never once had Changlan disobeyed Liu Qingqiu's orders, and he couldn't conceal his shock. But Shen Qingqiu knew that this situation was even more severe. So is that like what's coming off the blade here? Like it's just oozing this demonic chi around and that's the black swirls? Is that what it is? If Luo Binghe really was hit with Jinmo's recoil in this place, the lives of everyone on the scene, as well as the entirety of Huayu City and within a 50-kilometer radius would be forfeit. As a last resort, Shen Qingqiu unsheathed Zhuya. Come here, Luo Binghe. Today we must come to a resolution. Luo Binghe raised his head and gave him a dark look. In the next moment, he'd flashed forward to around a meter away. Then he raised his hand and drew a barrier that covered the entire roof, isolating them from everyone else. At last, he smiled, expression twisted. Resolution? How can this be a resolution? How can this be resolved? Shizune, at this point, do you really think that's what's between us can be settled cleanly? Why can't it? Shen Qingqiu breathed in lightly. Though he was clutching the sword, he had no intention of fighting. In truth, wielding this blade at this point would have no effect. As things are now, there's nothing I can say. Sure enough, even if we scheme until we're exhausted, we cannot outwit fate. Luo Binghe chuckled. Fate? What is fate? That which let a 4-year-old child be humiliated while no one lent a hand to help? That which let an innocent old woman die of heartbreak and starvation? With each line he stepped forward, menacing. Or that which let me fight with dogs for scraps, or let the person I wholeheartedly adored lie to me, abandon me, betray me, and shove me down into a place worse than purgatory with his own 2 hands. Shizune, look at what I've become. Am I strong enough? Do you know how I spent those years within the endless abyss? For 3 years underground, at all times and all moments, my mind only thought of Shizune. I wondered why Shizune would do this to me, why he refused to give me even a single chance to explain or plead my case. You want me to concede that this was fate of the heavens ordained for me? I thought for such a long time, and I finally understood. Within Luo Binghe's smile, there lay a spine-chilling malice. None of that is important. It's enough to just do what I want. Fate either never existed at all, or it's something I should trample beneath my feet. Well, now you know, Shen Qingqiu! What are we going to do about this? With the scorching sun overhead, the last wisps of clouds had disappeared without a trace. Sunlight flooded through the entire city, its brilliance dazzling, like the entire land had been strewn with pure gold. Shen Qingqiu turned his gaze away from the sky. Because he'd been staring straight at the sun, unexpectedly, some tears glistened in his vision. Even though he'd had no other choice, he frankly was greatly responsible for Luo Binghe having reached this point. He had become a dark young man who only thought of revenge on society. Originally, Shen Qingqiu had wanted to stop Luo Binghe from going to such extremes, but everything he had done had only failed to have a positive effect. It had actually etched Luo Binghe's hatred and resentment even deeper into his bones. Luo Binghe saw how Shen Qingqiu's expression softened without warning, and he couldn't help but startle. However, in the same moment, an incredible pain assailed his head. He clenched his teeth, his hand clutching tightly around Jin Mo, which was trying to break free. No, he couldn't take the recoil here, at least not in this moment. To his shock, Shen Qingqiu gently said, "Don't let it overpower your mind." Upon hearing this voice, in a daze, Luo Binghe was transported to those years on Shijing Peak. It became increasingly harder for him to control himself. There seemed to be a sharp knife churning within his brain, and Shinmo's black flame suddenly surged. The assault this time was ferocious. Luo Binghe was in unbearable agony when unexpectedly, someone tenderly embraced his shoulders. What followed was a blast of spiritual chi akin to the collapse of a 1,000-kilometer dike. Like a rainstorm after a long drought, it poured into Luo Binghe's body like a flood, extinguishing Jin Mo's malevolence, which had reached a deadlock. Because it's him hugging him, right? Luo Binghe's breathing evened out, returned to normal, but his heart went cold. Self-detonation. Someone in the crowd was already yelling in shock, "Shen Qingqiu self-detonated!" Shen Qingqiu let go of Luo Binghe and slowly backed away, staggering once. Zhuya fell first. Its master's spiritual energy was gone, and a sword exists with its master. The blade shattered into multiple pieces in midair. Oh, death! What the fudge? Shen Qingqiu had always been in the bad habit of swallowing his blood, but at this moment he could no longer choke it down. Having totally exhausted his spiritual energy, he was now lesser than even a common person, a mere ruined shell. His voice was light and fluttering, the wind blowing most of it away, and yet Luo Binghe could hear him just as distinctly as before. What he said was, "For all that passed, I repay you today." Think of it as me doing one good thing at the end. Then he toppled backward and off the building. What? At first, Luo Binghe only blankly watched, everything playing out before his eyes, now many times slower. Even the moment in which Shen Qingqiu fell slowed until it was crystal clear. The body dropping in midair was like a blood-stained paper kite. Only when Luo Binghe's body started moving by itself, scrambling to catch Shen Qingqiu before he hit the ground, did he finally discover that Shen Qingqiu's torso was light and insubstantial. His body empty without a wisp of spiritual energy. He was truly akin to a paper kite, liable to be ripped at the slightest force. In fact, one didn't need force. It had already fallen apart. Luo Binghe was still in disbelief. Didn't Shizun hate his blood more than anything? Wasn't he unwilling to even be near him, to associate with him at all? So why, at the last moment, had he so gently helped to contain Luo Binghe's mind, as tender as he had been in all those years long past? Why hadn't he hesitated to help Luo Binghe suppress Shinmo's recoil, to the point of destroying his own spiritual energy? All around him, people seemed to be muttering things like, "Execute the demon," and "Eliminate your own for the sake of justice." Luo Binghe's mind was in a muddle. He could only hold Shen Qingqiu and mumble, "Shizun." The Shijing Peak disciples had fought the Huanhua Palace disciples the entire way and finally arrived. Ning Yingying had by now heard that Luo Binghe was alive. She was both surprised by and happy at the sudden reunion. But then she saw Shen Qingqiu and his eyes peacefully closed. The words she'd been about to say took a turn, and she said in a trembling voice, "Hello, Shizun, what happened to him?" Liu Qingge walked forward, a smear of blood lingering by his lips. His expression was heavy as he said, "He's dead." The disciples were dumbstruck. Well, who killed him? Mingfan said suddenly. The crowd's gaze focused on Luo Binghe. Strictly speaking, Luo Binghe had not killed Shen Qingqiu, but Shen Qingqiu had indeed self-detonated and died before him. The disciples behind Mingfan drew their swords about to attack when Liu Qingge said, "You can't defeat him." Mingfan's eyes were bright red. Well, then surely Liu Shizu can kill him to avenge Shizun, right? I can't defeat him either, Liu Qingge said lightly. Mingfan choked. Liu Qingge wiped away the blood by his mouth. Neither did he kill Shen Qingqiu. However, though he didn't kill Shen Qingqiu did indeed die because of him. Each of Liu Qingge's words were like a knife drawn from a sheath. Sangjiang Mountain must avenge this grudge. Luo Binghe turned a deaf ear to it all. His mind was entirely a mess and totally at a loss. And he still held Shen Qingqiu's rapidly cooling body. It seemed like he wanted to call out to Shen Qingqiu to shake him awake, but he also didn't dare to. As if he were afraid of being scolded, he murmured, "Shizun." "Stop calling him Shizun," Mingfan snapped. "Shizun can't bear such a burden. My brethren, let's fight together. So what if we can't defeat him? What more can he do to kill us?" Ning Yingying spread her arms to stop him. Mingfan was furious and agitated. He thought that Ning Yingying was still clinging to old affections. "Shimei, look what it's come to. How can you still not get it?" "You shut up," said Ning Yingying. "What would Shizun think if you rushed to your death like this? If he heard, what would he say? Shizun would rather be infected than see us taken advantage of or bullied. Yet you'd throw away your life so easily?" "Come on, Ning Yingying. Explain to Luo Binghe what was going on." All these years, Ning Yingying had always had the charming attitude of a young maiden. At these abrupt, harsh words, Mingfan halted. After a long while, tears burst forth and flowed down his face. Sobbing, he wept miserably. It's so unfair to Shizun! Even though he absolutely didn't collude with demons, everyone kept saying that he did. That he was a killer, a degenerate. And they threw him in the water prison. He didn't give a chance to clear his name. He choked on sobs. "Oh my God, share, I don't know I don't know where this is going! But tell Luo Binghe, tell him the truth!" He choked on sobs. Even though he obviously loved this brat so much. At the Immortal Alliance conference, he bet 5,000 spirit stones on him without hesitation. His hopes for him were that high. Whenever anyone praised him, Shizun would be so happy. And afterward, he refused to return Zhangyang to Wanzhong Peak and instead insisted on keeping it so he could erect a sword mount in the back of the mountain. He was heartbroken for so long. And in the end, this is what he got? Luo Binghe listened in a trance, unsure if this was an illusion or reality. Is that so? At that time, Shizun was utterly heartbroken? Ning Yingying stepped forward towards Luo Binghe. Her eyes were red, but her words and breathing were steady. "Ah, Luo, we weren't there for the Jinlan City incident, but we heard all about it. I don't know why you didn't return to Sangjiang Mountain, despite being alive, and I don't know why you wouldn't stand up for Shizun, and I certainly don't know what happened at the Immortal Alliance conference. But Shizun's kindness when he raised and nurtured you, and his feelings when he doted on and protected you, those weren't fake. Everyone knows. We saw for ourselves." "Well, I wish they could have spoke up sooner!" After a pause, she continued, "If you feel that Shizun in the old days didn't treat you well, then think back on the day you lost your jade pendant. Our Shizong inexplicitly backed off all at once. You yourself knew there was something strange, right? No one else on Shijing Peak would turn leaves into weapons for the purpose of teaching a small lesson. Because they saw him in the tavern and Luo Binghe involuntarily clutched Shen Qingqiu tighter. He whispered, "I was wrong, Shizun. I know I was wrong. I never wanted to kill you." "My words end here," Ning Yingying declared. "If Shizun really did wrong you in some way and you can't under any circumstances forgive him, then at least today he finally repaid it all, right? So from now on," at this point she couldn't take it anymore and she turned her head, "I ask you that you stop calling him Shizun." Repaid? That's right. Moments ago, Shizun had said something about repaying him. Had Shen Qingqiu been saying that in exchange for pushing Luo Binghe into the endless abyss, that he would also fall for his sake? Luo Binghe started to panic. I don't want you to repay me. I just couldn't get over my anger, he was speaking to himself. I couldn't get over it. Whenever you saw me, you acted like you'd seen a ghost. And then you would happily smile and laugh with the others when in the past you only did that with me. And to me, you would say only the bare minimum to me, and you kept suspecting me of everything. But I was wrong, he stammered and stuttered, talking as he wiped the blood away from Shen Qingqiu's face. You disdained me for being a demon. So I was afraid that if I returned directly to Sanjiang Mountain, you'd throw me out. I thought that if I took over Huanhua Palace and became like you, a leader of righteous cultivators, I could maybe make you happy. Luo Binghe's voice trembled. Shizun, I really... Oh, okay, so, is he dead? I don't have words right now, actually. And we still have 2 chapters to go. What? Evening came with the high winds in the Borderlands, chapter 44, and part 9, Borderlands, whistling through the scattered houses of the little garrison. All down the street, only a single tea house shone from within. Warm yellow lantern light lent the palace a semblance of life. The so-called Borderlands weren't the border between the 2 countries or cities. Rather, they were the border between the demon realm and the human realm. The 2 races belonged to different worlds. For the most part, the endless abyss ruptured the space between them. But there were always those few places where the boundary between realms was weak, where time and space were in disarray, and where the residents of the 2 realms would often end up slipping back and forth between them. On occasion, in some cases, someone maliciously stole across the border. Few ordinary people were willing to live in a place where the demon race could emerge from thin air and vanish like ghosts, skulking around one day and then killing and pillaging the next. Thus, signs of human life in the Borderlands only grew sparser by the year. Even when the dimensions of different realms began to intermingle in a prosperous city, the population would usually end up evacuating in a mass migration, leaving behind only the disciples sent by the cultivation world to guard the Borderlands. Liu poured the newcomer a bowl of hot wine as he chatted with a few others gathered around the stove. Brother, where did you come from? The south. Out that way. A few people looked at the other, their expressions outstanding. It must be hard out there right now. The newcomer raised the bowl of wine and frowned. Who said it wasn't? There's a battle twice every 3 days. No one can endure that kind of torture. Sanjiang Mountain and Huanhua Palace both belong to the 4 major sects. Why are they making such a fuss these days? Someone in the quarter cut in. Their disciples can't come face to face for a second without getting into a huge fight. Won't their sect leaders control them a little? How long have you been in this damn place where birds won't even stop to shit? Liu said. You've gone too long living under a rock. It's precisely because they have their sect leaders' tacit permission that the disciples have been fighting harder and harder. Why is that? Liu, tell us about it. Liu cleared his throat. It's quite complicated to explain. Do you know who the current head of Huanhua Palace is? I heard it's some kid. Liu laughed harshly. If Luo Binghe can be called a kid, then you and I are less than nothing. This Luo Binghe is something else. He came from Sanjiang Mountain sect and was even the head disciple of Qijing Peak's Shen Qingqiu. At the Immortal Alliance conference a while back, he dominated the rankings, and now that was truly a sight. If he came from Sanjiang Mountain, why would he become the head of Huanhua Palace? A listener said doubtfully. After the Immortal Alliance conference, Luo Binghe disappeared for 3 years. No one knows where he went or what he did during that time. Shen Qingqiu said that he'd perished, so everyone believed that he was already dead. Who could have known that 3 years later he'd make a grand comeback, and had even become an influential figure at Huanhua Palace? Then he forced Shen Qingqiu to self-detonate on the spot in Huayu City. I never understood that, said the newcomer. This Shen Qingqiu, was he wrongly accused or did he deserve such a fate? Is this Shen Qingqiu? What is happening? Who can say, said Lu Liu, that Sangzhong Mountain is naturally united against outsiders, and they'll fight anyone who says anything. They've always been like this, holding relations over reason. They won't even let people talk about something as damning as that on-ding peak lord Shen Qingqiu fleeing to the demon realm. Oh! So Shen Qingqiu did flee to the demon realm. Okay. Huh. Huanhua Palace changed masters not long after that Huayu City incident. The old palace master went into seclusion and disappeared without a trace. Luo Binghe took power in his stead and kills anyone who says anything otherwise. All because of a dead man, someone muttered. This dead man made quite a few waves, said Lu Liu. Shen Qingqiu is from Sangzhong Mountain sect, and he was even the peak lord of a second-ranked peak. His corpse should by rights go back to Qijing Peak to be interred with the former generations of the peak lords, but the problem is Luo Binghe refuses to return the body. Everyone was imagining something along the lines of Luo Binghe whipping the corpse and putting it on display, and their hair stood on end. If he refuses to return it, can't Sangzhong Mountain take it by force? Someone asked. That peak lord of Baizon Peak is still around. Lu Liu shrugged. He can't beat Luo Binghe. What? The group's worldview was shattered. In the eyes of the world, the peak lord of Baizon Peak had always held the position of undefeatable war god. That this peak lord couldn't beat someone or whatever was honestly unthinkable. You don't know? Lu Liu asked. Ever since Huayu City, Baizon Peak's Liu Qingge has fought Luo Binghe countless times, but he's never won once. And that's not all. Luo Binghe brought Shen Qingqiu's body back to Huanhua Palace, and only a few days later, he personally kidnapped Chanchao Peak's Mu Qingfeng. Oh! The doctor! Chanchao Peak has always disregarded worldly affairs, someone said. They help the dying and heal the injured, so how did they manage to provoke this devil incarnate? Luo Binghe took him back to Huanhua Palace and told him to heal and revive Shen Qingqiu. Lu Liu sighed. The man had been dead for so long he'd gone stiff. What was there to heal? When I see the two sects fighting, Sangzhong Mountain always likes calling Huanhua Palace the dogs of demons. Why is that? The newcomer asked. Well, that's because for some reason, the entirety of Sangzhong Mountain from top to bottom insists that Luo Binghe is a fiend from the demon race, said Lu Liu. Numerous abbots of Zhaohua Monastery have personally testified that spiritual energy circulates normally inside Luo Binghe, but Sangzhong Mountain still insists on calling him that. The two sects go back and forth, repaying grievance with grievance, growing their feud larger and larger. The way I see it, one day their ships will capsize together and no one will survive. So, in the end, Lu Liu didn't forget to comfort himself. Being sent to guard the border, to be free and idle like us, was actually a good thing. I really can't understand what's going on with this master-disciple pair, let alone those two sects, the person in the corner said, confused. One theory is that it comes down to a grudge as deep as the sea, but there's another theory, and this old Lu thinks that this one's more believable. Let me tell you. Lu Liu was just about to launch into another round of enthusiastic gossip when suddenly a burst of knocking sounded outside the door. Everyone in the room immediately raised their guard. All their mischief and exhaustion was swept away, and each individual readied their weapons and spiritual artifacts. The Borderlands possessed only rare traces of human life, being abnormally desolate. The members of their squadron were the only permanent residents of the entire garrison. The ones who'd gone out on patrol wouldn't have returned so quickly. And the few remaining residents were even less likely to risk death by wandering outside the middle of the night. No one inside responded, and after a while there were two more knocks on the wooden door. Who is it? Lu Liu called out harshly. Suddenly, a chill wind blew by and extinguished all the oil lamps and candles on the table. The room instantly turned pitch black, leaving only behind the dull red light of the stove faintly burning. The silhouette of a man carrying a sword on his back cast itself through the paper window. The person called in a clear voice, "Liu Ge, it's me. It's cold today, so I came back early. Open the door and let me warm up with a cup of wine." The group released their breaths and were holding and cursed. "Oh, old Shen, are you trying to die? Just knocking on the door without a word? If we didn't know better, we'd say you were eaten by a ghost." The person outside the door chuckled. Lu Liu felt something was strange, but couldn't figure out exactly what. He said, "Come in," and opened the door. A gust of frigid wind swept on their faces, but there was nothing there. Liu slammed the door shut. Light the lamps! The lamps! The lamps! The newcomer's hand trembled. He turned and formed a fire seal, and the flickering flame illuminated a few silhouettes. He'd yet to light a candle when he turned back around and stuttered, Liu, I wanted to ask you. What are you stammering for? Liu said, impatient. Well, there were only 6 people in this room, right? So why am I seeing what looks like 7? Dead silence. Suddenly there was a loud cry. No one knew who attacked first, but the screams and sound of clashing weapons rose and fell. Liu yelled, light the lamps! The lamps! Everyone hurried to form fire seals, but their movements were too uncoordinated. The flames and silhouettes swayed wildly and disoriented their vision, making it even harder to see who was who. Afraid of harming their own, no one dared to swing too aggressively, and so the thing that had wormed into their midst took advantage of the chaos. It was like catfishing. It was like catching fish in turbid water. A claw here, a knife there. As Liu mentally cursed, something suddenly grabbed him by the neck. His eyes rolled back into his head, and his feet slowly left the ground, unable to see what had grabbed him by the throat. Just when he thought his life would end right there and then, the door flew open and a whirling gale swept inside. Another silhouette charged in. No one saw how the newcomer fought, but Liu heard an uncanny cry by his ear that sounded like it had come from the thing holding him by the neck. Its grip loosened. The 6 people in the room hadn't yet recovered from their fright, and some were lying flat on the ground. This new person snapped his fingers, and the oil lamps in the room lit all at once. He bent down to study the bodies for a moment and then rose. They're fine, just unconscious. This person was caked in black mud, like he'd been excavated from a grave. His face was covered in whiskers that was densely obscured by his facial features. Despite his lean figure, his face was that of a large bearded man's. Liu finally stopped shivering and stared him up and down for a long time before cupping his fist. Well, many thanks to this distinguished gentleman for your assistance chasing away that creature. The new person slung an arm over Liu's shoulder. This humble one has something to ask. Please do. What year is it? Oh, what? What? Why are we getting to this? What is happening? Why are we suddenly jumping to this? What? Oh. As Shen Qingqiu, I feel like we just stopped the story and jumped to this thing. What is happening? As Shen Qingqiu had tumbled his way down from the mountain, covered in mud, half rolling, half crawling. He'd fervently prayed for airplanes shooting towards the sky to be destroyed 10,000 times. Destruction by spiritual energy implosion or by asshole. Either was accepted. Originally, most of the strategies he thought up to preserve his life had involved faking his death. But what was the point of faking one's death? The trope of plotting a fake death with a puppet or look-alike while allowing the original person to flee had been done to death in TV series. So the strategy he settled on was dying for real. That day, in Huayu City, he really and truly had self-detonated, and even done a good deed along the way, absorbing an enormous amount of the berserk demonic energy in Luo Binghe's body. To say that his meridians had been ground to dust was no exaggeration. Only by facing death could one return alive. The sun moon dew mushroom was also called the flesh mushroom. I want to see what this is. Okay, so the thing, only by facing death could one return alive. This is a play on the quote from Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Throw them into danger and they will survive. Put them on deadly ground and they will live. The sun moon dew mushroom was also called the flesh mushroom. Flesh mushroom is another name for the real-life Lingji mushroom, which the sun moon dew mushroom is based on. And this name was entirely literal. Though this mushroom wasn't especially useful for cultivating, it still grew by collecting spiritual energy from nature along with the essence from the sun and the moon. And it was so sunny that day on top of the roof. If you planted its sprout in soil rich with spiritual energy and nurtured it, meticulously sculpted it, and watered it with blood and chi, once it matured, you could cultivate a living body of flesh. The body could grow just fine, but it was impossible to create a soul via this method. That was to say, you could only grow a soulless empty shell. You couldn't find a more suitable vessel. Oh! Okay! Well, damn, I was like, what is happening? Plant a little Shen in the spring and harvest a big Shen in the autumn was no longer just a dream. Damn it, MXTX! But the dew mushroom wasn't a Chinese cabbage, something you could simply grow with a handful of fertilizer and water. Shen Qingqiu had destroyed a number of mushroom sprouts before he'd cultivated one that hadn't grown crooked. A good while back, he and Shen Qingqiu had calculated the coordinates to carry out this long-distance operation. Beneath the tallest building of Huayu City, they had set up a transportation array, and at the time when the sun was highest, Shen Qingqiu had triggered a second array, this one for activation on Sangshang Mountain. The moment Shen Qingqiu's soul left his body, he had been sent into the mature dew mushroom, which had been buried deep in the mountains of the Borderlands. That's why he went to the demon realm. That's why he was wanting to make sure it was sunny. That's why he was on the rooftop. Oh my god. Shen Qingqiu, you are dastardly, and you made Luo Binghe realize everything. Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. We still have a volume and a half to go. Oh, we still have 2.5 volumes to go. What? Oh. 3 locations, 3 arrays. If you connected them with straight lines, they would have formed the most stable shape, an equilateral triangle. Reasonably speaking, it was absolutely stable, absolutely reliable. The only flaw was a certain person. Great master airplane shooting towards the sky was just too reliable. Shen Qingqiu had been worried about flaws like overlarge arms or uneven legs, or a crucial part simply not growing. But none of those problems had occurred. However, sure enough, using chemical fertilizer to mature the sun, moon, dew mushroom had resulted in some side effects. Just after waking, Shen Qingqiu had waited quietly for a while, but he hadn't heard that detestable Google Translate-like notification. He internally exploded with joy. The system hasn't appeared. Ha ha! The system hasn't appeared. The big shots changed hardware. I'm not going to reinstall a virus like you. Ha ha ha! Though he could only rest assured temporarily, he couldn't resist dancing in joy. Dancing in joy, my ass. His whole body was still buried in the ground. He couldn't move an inch. For days, he remained buried, gathering strength from his fingertips until he could finally move his limbs. And only after this did Shen Qingqiu finally, shakily crawl out. Once he broke through the Earth's surface. Oh my god, he's a zombie! He didn't even get a chance to revel in the fresh air of freedom before he fell face first onto the ground. This body isn't listening to my commands again. This left him splayed on the mountainside. Shen Qingqiu spent an entire day walking while doing radio calisthenics, right up until the evening. While his gait finally resembled a normal person's, at least he was no longer simultaneously putting the same arm and leg forward. The human cast that had been used had been based on his former appearance as Shen Yan. It didn't compare to Shen Qingqiu's immortal poise, but it wasn't a bad mortal container. It just had a bit of a certain listlessness. The listlessness of a worthless pretty boy idling his life away. But because he'd used some of his blood while cultivating the dew mushroom, a touch of foreign influence was inevitable. When Shen Qingqiu tumbled to the side of a creek and used a sharp mountain rock to scrape away his whiskers for a look, his new face was still 3 or 4 parts of tin similar to Shen Qingqiu's. Without a word, he repasted the whiskers onto his face. Oh my god. Finally, after managing to tumble his way to the bottom of the mountain, he grabbed a passerby and asked for the year. Well, fuck, it's already been 5 years! He could understand that right after waking up, his body was uncoordinated and occasionally unable to move because he needed some time to adjust to the new configuration. But only waking up after being buried for 5 years? What was this? Oh my god, the connection to the 5 years in the abyss, the 5 years in the Borderlands? Also, a roast was a roast, but this body was practically bursting with spiritual energy. The original Shen Qingqiu's body had been quite abundant in spiritual energy when without a cure wasn't causing it trouble, but the difference between that and the sensations he had in this one, it was like the difference between 2 bars of battery, still enough to use, and a full charge, the second after charging and pulling the cord. He would even go so far as to say that he was a generator. Did this count as shedding the body and replacing his bones, changing his tendons and cleansing his marrows? An idiom describing being reborn as a Taoist, but can also mean turn over a new leaf or change completely, and referring to a qi circulation manual. Turning over a new leaf, huh? In the words of Candy Muse, it would be once you turn over a leaf, it's still the same leaf. Was this the drumbeat leading to his own ascension to OP-hood? After so many years, Shen Qingqiu felt for the first time that he'd acquired a lick of dignity owed to reincarnated transmigrators. For the first time, his unskilled self would perhaps not drag down his seniors in the transmigration regiment. When he turned back in, Liu was rambling. Well, these past few years, the demon race has invaded more and more often. All sorts of demon ghouls and ghosts have poured into the human realm. A major battle is likely imminent. Oh, I haven't even asked yet this distinguished gentleman for his immortal name. The words, haha, this humble one is the untalented Xijing Peak Lord of Sangzhong Mountain, the Zhuya Sword, Shen Qingqiu of the Central Plains, veered off course just before they reached Shen Qingqiu's throat. So close. So close. He'd almost given them his old name. He couldn't think of another name in the moment, and after muttering for a bit, he resolutely said 2 words. Peerless Cucumber. Everything that had happened before was unto smoke. From today forth, as he walked with Zhang Hu, he would use this ID, which had been plastered all over the comment section for years. After he spoke, Shen Qingqiu glided away, leaving only a room full of petrified people in his wake. After a while, the newcomer mumbled, he just said he was peerless. What was it? Peerless chrysanthemum? Liu guessed. Wasn't it peerless crown? No. It was peerless crazy flower. Shen Qingqiu had walked several tens of feet away, but at the sound of this, his feet slipped out from under him. Perhaps he would have to think about it some more later and maybe switch to a different name. The first step to starting an all-new life would, of course, have to be proceedings with which Shen Qingqiu was most familiar. First, for a prop, he needed a folding fan. One with a white silk base decorated with an ink wash painting of mountains and rivers. Shen Qingqiu snapped the fan open and waved it before his chest, sending his long hair and whiskers flying. Perhaps this image wasn't ideal and was slightly unsuited to said prop, but that didn't matter. With a folding fan in hand, badass act at my command. Shen Qingqiu placed one foot on the mountain rock and said, "Speak! Exactly what intentions have brought you to infiltrate the human realm?" We still have 1 chapter left! Oh my god! Oh! I am dazzled. A crowd of trembling people, chapter 45. No demons huddled before him. Though to be honest, from appearance alone, there's basically no difference. Usually we only steal small trinkets from the human realm and take them back to trade, the frontmost one said, shaking with fear. The demon realm didn't have a common currency, and so they often bartered. If something caught their eye, they'd trade for it, or if it didn't, they wouldn't. Between the demon race's questionable skill in craftsmanship and artistic tastes, to them, an everyday piece of human realm embroidery was a top-notch artisanal product. Therefore, all manner of ordinary trinkets from the human realm were exceedingly popular among demonkind. By contrast, the items they valued least were the various crystals with special effects that were a dime a dozen in their homeland. But being a dime a dozen in the demon realm didn't mean there wasn't a market for using them among humans. Shen Qingqiu snapped his fan shut and spoke solemnly. This remote and destitute town, where neither birds shit nor chickens lay eggs, has poor production rates and a stagnant economy. And the level of general happiness is lower than average. Is it wrong for you to profit from their misfortune? The minor demon was at a loss. He was pretty sure that in the moment he was captured, this lofty master had also been stealing, borrowing clothes as well as a fan with which he happily was fanning himself. I was compelled by the circumstances, Shen Qingqiu thought. Surely you can't expect me to wander around in clothes that have been exhumed from dirt like some kind of savage. Our peacock! However, this actually opened up a new line of thought. These minor demons had never dared to do more than snoop and thieve here and there. But if he could supply them with an honest channel for small goods, well, perhaps within the world that revolved around cultivation and monster fighting, he could forge paths into a new frontier based on farming and amassing capital. Shen Qingqiu irresponsibly fantasized for a while and then felt as if he were To accept underlings, they needed to understand each other's cultural practices. "Do you eat rotten flesh?" he asked amiably. The minor demons shook their heads. Shen Qingqiu was about to sigh in relief when the leader effusively said, "My pa only said that the rich and influential can afford rotten flesh." Enough. Is it at all a question of economic access, okay? After climbing to the top of the demon realm, Luo Binghe had been more than influential, right? So how come he never enjoyed this kind of thing on page? After a pause, Shen Qingqiu changed his angle. "What's your name?" The first one replied, "Six balls." What does that mean? "When I was born, my pa held me and said I was 6 balls heavy." Shen Qingqiu was speechless. "What balls? Shot put balls or ping pong balls? This kind of name is absolutely meaningless." The rest of the demons scrambled to declare their own names, each one more unbearable than the last. They seemed to take much pride in them. Are the names chosen by demon commoners all this literal? Family names didn't exist in demon culture, so the names they chose were daring and audacious, bold and unrestrained. You could tell at a glance that those generals with names that left people speechless, such as Elder Skyhammer or Elder Single Arm, had started as nobodies and climbed up to the top. But if they came from nobility such as Mobei-jun, Sha Hualing, or Luo Binghe's father, Tianlan Jun, their name situation was a little better. It then occurred to Shen Qingqiu that it was fortunate Luo Binghe hadn't been tossed into the demon realm and found there. If he'd been taken in by demon commoners, in accordance with these naming conventions, he might have been dubbed something that was made to sound like his parents hated him. What would he be called? Jade-faced little playboy? Evil demonic incubus spirit? No. It needed to be something much more earth-shatteringly terrifying. Then he remembered that in the original story, some girl had bashfully expressed that Luo Binghe's that was very that. With an uncontrollable, uncountable harem and innumerable trysts, he could effortlessly pull his trigger in every manner of setting, and even after eons, the gun remained infallible, as vigorous as ever. In truth, the name Peerless Cucumber would have suited Luo Binghe quite well. But since Shen Qingqiu had already taken it, then Luo Binghe might as well be Heavenly Pillar Jun? oh, fuck! Low Heavenly Pillar! How painfully exhilarating! Shen Qingqiu had been laughing for a while when he abruptly slapped himself. "The fuck is wrong with you? Getting carried away, using the great master protagonist to come up with a tasteless, dirty joke in your head? What's funny about this? Don't you get to say that some people are off limits for your crass humor?" The minor demons watched this lofty master first laugh so hard they fell to the ground and slap himself in anger. Mystified, they didn't dare so much as breathe loudly. "They think he's that!" Then Shen Qingqiu suddenly stopped smiling and pressed his fan into Six Ball's shoulder, pulling him close. As he did, Shen Qingqiu plucked a sword tassel from the demon's waist. "Where did you get this?" It was a sword tassel, but it was no ordinary sword tassel. This decoration belonged to the #1 female lead, Liu Mingyan. It was Shui Si's sword tassel. It was what male and female leads always exchanged as love tokens. You get it? Back at Sangzhong Mountain, Shen Qingqiu had made a point to take special notice of this one, so it didn't need to be distinctive to stand out to him. How had this thing fallen into the hands of a minor demon in the Borderlands? "I'm terrified," Six Balls responded. I didn't steal it, I found it." "Hit the streets and find me another one then if it's so easy." Shen Qingqiu thought, "Where did you find it?" "Oh, these days an important person has been traveling the roads at night. Though first they send their subordinates to clear the way. We were a little curious and hid by the roadside, and afterward we found this on the road." The important person the minor demon described had to be someone at the pinnacle of power in the demon realm. This type of character didn't frequent the Borderlands. They would only draw attention. In fact, the local environment was most unsuitable for them. Exactly what kind of important person would boldly take over the roads with such swagger, even going so far as to leave behind an intimate item of Liu Mingyan's? The first possibility that came to Shen Qingqiu's mind, of course, was a certain someone. Probably Sha Hualing, right? Because she didn't like her to begin with. He asked, "The most important person you're talking about, was it a good-looking young man?" When he thought about it, he decided against suppressing his conscience and clarified, "Not just good-looking, he's very good-looking, especially good-looking. Fair skin, pretty face, tall, doesn't smile often, but when he does, it's exceptionally dark." Six Balls shook his head and then suddenly blushed. "Why are you blushing?" Shen Qingqiu interrogated him for a while, but he couldn't get any answers. He decided internally this mystery person was not Luo Binghe. No, did you not hear the story in the tavern? Luo Binghe is still at Huanhua Palace crying over your corpse. Luo Binghe carried Jin Mo, and it was super crazy, ridiculous, huge-ass cheat that broke every single rule. With a casual slash, you could cleave the space between two realms, and with the slice, you could open yourself a package through which to enter the demon realm. Luo Binghe would never expend the effort required to make a special trip to the Borderlands, let alone to faithfully follow the path of smugglers. If that was the case, a problem arose. Demons had passed through the area, yet they'd left behind Liu Mingyang's belongings. Could it be that Liu Mingyan had slipped up and been captured? Shen Qingqiu didn't remember Liu Mingyan being the #1 female lead, suffering such treatment in the original work. What dumbass insignificant bandit wouldn't dare to touch Luo Binghe's wife? Dude, look, did you not hear I wish Liu had been able to tell his theory, because I'm pretty sure it would have rocked his world. Furthermore, though the Liu siblings normally each cultivated their own peaks, the original work had mentioned that their relationship was quite good. Perhaps their sibling bond only seemed distant because neither was the clingy type. But whether Shen Qingqiu saw her as Liu Qingge's little sister, or as Qingqi's beloved disciple, he just couldn't stand aside and do nothing. Moreover, at this time, the system was seemingly unable to threaten him, for now, and thus he had nothing to fear with regard to restrictions or massive deductions of B points or whatever, so why not go check it out? Probably because he's not near Luo Binghe, so the system doesn't feel the need to bring anything up. Where is the rift in the boundary between realms? Shen Qingqiu asked. At midnight, Shen Qingqiu hid in the treetops with all traces of his presence concealed, overlooking the area below. After an unknown length of time, a certain patch of air began to visibly distort. Shen Qingqiu's eyes lit up. He held his breath, attention rapt, and watched a youth in black rush out of it. They were a great distance away from each other, but Shen Qingqiu's eyes were incredibly sharp, and he could see the boy clearly. This youth was around 17 or 18 years old, with a tense expression on his sharp and handsome face. Actually, Shen Qingqiu found that face somewhat familiar. He just couldn't remember where he'd seen it. Nevertheless, he was certain that he had. Suddenly, a crisp female voice, at once sweet and cold, broke the silent night and echoed through the forest. Baisan's Peak's disciples are truly exceptional. Your body is constrained by 100 immortal binding cables, and yet you're still able to wipe the floor with a great many of my subordinates, and you've fled so far. I truly can't lower my guard for an instant. On hearing this voice, realization hit Shen Qingqiu. A demon who was beautiful, of noble background, and had subordinates, who a minor demon would blush at mentioning. It had to be Sha Hualing. Sorry, so what if this girl was one of the female leads? She hadn't been around for way too long, and thus he'd pretty much forgotten about her. I mean, she was hot, but who's taking notes? If Liu Mingyan had fallen into Sha Hualing's hands, her fate was even more cause to worry. If Sha Hualing settled for slashing up Liu Mingyan's face, she'd be going easy on her. No wonder this youth's running posture had seemed odd just now, his body noticeably heavy. Shen Qingqiu had only focused on his face before, but now that he continued looking downward, as it turned out, there were numerous thin silver wires bound around the lad. The color of his robes confirmed that he really was from Baisan Peak, but Shen Qingqiu could summon no memory of having ever seen such a young disciple before. The youth knew he couldn't beat his opponent in speed, so he abruptly braked, his eyebrows furrowed fiercely. If you want to fight, let's fight! There was a flash of gauzy red cloth, and Sha Hualing walked towards him with swaying hips that emphasized her figure. It took me so much effort to catch you, she said, full of smiles. How could I bear to fight you? Quickly, why don't you come back with me? The youth's temper was violent, and he spat at her. You won't? Sha Hualing asked. I won't damage your spiritual energy, but chopping off an arm or a leg or whatever won't injure that part of you. As she spoke, her right hand reached out to grab the youth, but before she could touch him, an odd tremor suddenly traveled down her fingers. Sha Hualing assumed that she'd fallen for some trick on the youth's part and quickly withdrew. She then raised her hand to examine it. Her 5 cinnabar-painted nails had been uniformly trimmed a noticeable length shorter. It was only her nails, and it hadn't hurt in the least. But Sha Hualing's blood instantly went cold. Who's there? She shouted. If someone lurking nearby had cut her nails with such ease, then they could just effortlessly slice open her neck. Shen Qingqiu was feeling much more relieved as he released a twig plucked clean of leaves. In truth, he just wanted to scare Sha Hualing a little, and while he was at it, keeping her nails so long really wasn't good. There is no heterosexual man worried about a woman's nail length, so here we go. Every time Shen Qingqiu saw them, he was worried they'd break, which made him extraordinarily uncomfortable. Oh, I'm with you, Shen Qingqiu. I'm with you. Oh my god. Plus, they'd often scratched Luo Binghe's back into a bloody mess. Oh my god. Even if airplanes shooting towards the sky liked that kind of hardcore flavor. We'll talk about that. And even if Luo Binghe's healing ability was inhuman, it did mean this habit was proper or indicative of a healthy lifestyle. Sha Hualing's killing intent spiked. She whirled a red cloth and summoned a mass of chilling demonic chi, gathering it around her fingers, and then struck at the youth. This maiden wasn't scared stiff, she was scared angry. Truly a character. Shen Qingqiu had no choice but to leap down from the tree tops to drop between the two. He gathered energy in his hand and fired a spiritual blast, directly meeting Sha Hualing's. He had known that this body was full to bursting with spiritual energy, but he hadn't thought it was bursting to such an extent. Their palms hadn't yet connected when Sha Hualing was flung straight back like a repelled magnet. At the same time, those skimpy clothes tore open once more. Though this was an unexpected bonus, Shen Qingqiu had always insisted on the rule that under no circumstance look at an unexpected bonus from women in this world who have above average looks. And he censored it himself. Oh, Shen Qingqiu, I love you! Sha Hualing was also more than direct. Last time she let out some vicious words, but this time, having weighed their respective strengths, she had no words for the occasion and just dropped into a roll. When she lunged into that patch of distorted air, her figure instantly vanished. Shen Qingqiu tossed his fan several times, channeling spiritual energy into it and transforming the fan into a blade. Then in which he sliced down with a flip of his hand. The immortal binding cables fell into some 100 pieces. The youth performed the respectable act of cupping his fist. Many thanks to Senior for the rescue. In turn, Shen Qingqiu performed the respectable act of asking, "You're a disciple of Baizon Peak." "I am." "Under who?" "My master is the Baizon Peak Lord Liu Mingyan." Shen Qingqiu was genuinely astonished. Liu Mingyan never accepted disciples. Yes! On that Baizon Peak of his, at most there were people equal to him in seniority, and other than that, there were disciples his Xizhong and Shidi had taken in. The man himself wasn't interested in teaching. To be fair, what Baizon Peak called teaching was just putting effort into beating up on one person in particular. Shen Qingqiu had some slight suspicions. "What's your name?" "Yang Yizhan." The youth answered loud and clear. Like I said, he looked familiar, and so I definitely see him somewhere before, right? Oh! A young child could certainly grow up in 5 years. Shen Qingqiu looked Yang Yizhan up and down as he thought of how Liu Mingyan had sworn that he wouldn't accept disciples because it was too troublesome. But in the end, he hadn't he? "Senior?" asked Yang Yizhan. "How has your Shizun been these past few years?" said Shen Qingqiu. At their parting in Huayu City, Liu Mingyan had lost to Luo Binghe, and it must have been a true blow. Shen Qingqiu felt he absolutely had to ask after Shidi's current condition. "He's been defeated in every battle," Yang Yizhan said honestly. Shen Qingqiu was silent. The idea that the Baizon Peak Lord could be associated with the phrase "defeated in every battle," it really made one shake in one's boots. "Who did he fight?" Shen Qingqiu asked. "Luo Binghe?" Yang Yizhan humphed. "Who else but that little beast?" Shen Qingqiu's expression twisted slightly. Yang Yizhan himself was quite a bit younger than Luo Binghe, yet he still called him Little Beast. Who had he learned this from? He didn't yet know nowadays, whenever anyone in Sangzhong Mountain sect referred to Luo Binghe, it was always as Little Beast, Demon Fiend, or Ingrate. If they called him by his name and added that bastard, it was considered courteous. "How did you fall into that demon woman's hands?" Shen Qingqiu asked. Her words just now were a little strange. What was that "how could I bear to fight you" business about? Yang Yizhan's face immediately flushed red. If that demon woman hadn't used such devious methods, first disguising herself as a woman who'd fallen into misfortune, then, when I became suspicious, suddenly taking off, I absolutely wouldn't have fallen into her trap and been captured. Shen Qingqiu instantly understood. Well, look at yourself. Look at yourself. Are you really representative of Baisan Peak, he lectured? Avoiding feminine charms doesn't mean fearing them. So what if she took off her clothes? So what if a maiden stripped right in front of you? Back when your Shizun went to fight succubi, their entire cave was filled with unclothed bodies. Mind you, at the time, Shen Qingqiu had also been there, and true enough, he'd begun to suspect that Liu Qingqiu was either asexual or impotent. You are one to talk, sir! We'll talk about this in the discussion. Yang Yizhan's face was filled with longing and admiration. An entire cave, as expected of Shizun. Then he said curiously, does Senior know my master well? How else could you know of how my Shizun fought succubi? Shen Qingqiu coughed once. Old affairs. Old affairs. Getting back to the main topic, Sha Hualing hadn't just captured Yang Yizhan, she'd likely also taken Liu Mingyan. She would capture Shangzong Mountain sect disciples in such high-profile manners for only one reason. Something had gone wrong with Luo Binghe. Luo Binghe's cultivation system was unscientific in the extreme. He had to multitask and coordinate the two systems within himself in order to combine diametrically opposed forces into one working network. This meant that his spiritual and demonic chi had to operate as mutual checks and balances against each other. However, once Jin Mo got involved, his demonic chi surged and the balance was lost, throwing the whole thing into disarray. That's it? Oh my god! What? That's not the final chapter of whatever! Bitch, please. MXTX. Girl, you did it again. I'm going to try to remain calm. I don't think I can remain calm! What the fudge? Okay, it's out of my system now. It's out of my system. Ah! Oh! MXTX. Girl, I am so glad I'm reading ahead. I am sure if I didn't, somebody in the comments would have spoiled it. I just know it was going to happen. Man. This is where we're at. We're halfway through this volume. We still have 2 more volumes to go, plus half a volume. Say what? We still have 2.5 volumes to go. And the stuff that happened in this chapter the stuff that happened in chapter 43 was stuff that I thought was going to happen like volume 3. like end of volume 3, end of volume 4. Okay, look, I wrote this up on Whiteboard Coon before I started this chapter set. I just had it waiting in the wings. I'm like, oh, I'm going to start with this because my whole thing was, okay, Luo Binghe, at the time, before everything hit the fan in chapter 43, I was like, you know what? We learned from the last chapter set that he needs, in order to control Jin Mo, this sword that has this black demonic aura seeping out of it that's potentially going to hurt Luo Binghe and could potentially destroy this entire world, as we come to find out. He's like, in order for him to control that, he needs not only the power of love for himself, but the power of love from another, namely Shen Qingqiu. Although in the OG version, it was all the harem wives, right? So MXTX is a mastermind. She is genius. I did not foresee the sun, moon, dew mushroom having this ability. I was honestly flabbergasted by chapter 43 to the point I was like, wait, what? And then when we got to Borderlands, I'm like, well, he can't be dead. We're only halfway through volume 2. We still have 2 volumes to go. He has to come back. So I had a bunch of theories as I was reading, and I was like, I'm just going to wait till the discussion to get to them, because otherwise I'm going to lose my train of thought and we're going to go on. So let's just, This is what the OG is. At the moment, the system is not turned on for Shen Qingqiu yet. It may never turn back on, or I think it will once he gets close enough to Luo Binghe. I think it's going to turn itself back on, but I don't know, because he's kind of Shen Qingqiu, but not Shen Qingqiu. So he's Shen Yan in a new body that is Shen Qingqiu adjacent. So we'll talk about that. But oh my gosh, there's so much to talk about. There's so much to talk about. But okay, so the OG, we're just getting further and further and further away from the OG storyline, which is great because now we can forge ahead with this new storyline. But it's like the OG is about as far away as it can be from here, as we can tell now, right? Shen Qingqiu's sacrifice and his self-detonation, it basically just changed the entire game. Completely rewrote the script. And so in the OG, the whole thing was Shen Qingqiu was hunted by Luo Binghe out of revenge for the horrible things he'd done to him. And he ended up along the way, Luo Binghe had murdered sects. He had gathered up all these women into his harem, and sex is a band-aid, and had been going through until he got to the point where Shen Qingqiu was killed by Mo Beijun, who we haven't seen Mo Beijun in a long time. We'll talk about that. And then Shen Qingqiu was imprisoned and tortured until he presumably was going to be dead by the hands of Luo Binghe. So that original storyline is about as far away as it could possibly get right now, with the exception being about Shen Qingqiu. We don't know. He's supposedly in the demon realm. We're going to write that all down here of where we're at, where the new storyline, oh my God, Conspiracy Board Sama is going to be a mess, where the new storyline has taken us. We're going to talk about that. So, oh my God, I was speechless. The end of chapter 43, I didn't know what to say. I was like, because it's like MXTX, because this whole first half of volume 2, I was like, oh my God, how is Shen Qingqiu going to get out of this? And things got really bad. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what we're going to do about this. And now it's all kind of flipped on its head. So we need to talk about this. But so let's get through the little thing in the tavern brawl. Ning Yingying coming out of nowhere to be MVP of this volume and maybe this entire series. Her and Mingfan. Again, we talked about what we had to do was fix the characters and make them not just fodder characters, but make them have personalities and agency and identities. And Shen Qingqiu has done that. He's let Mingfan and Ning Yingying evolve into these fully realized, rounded characters who they basically did the job. I talked about it last week in Modao Zushi that there is a character that's kind of a catalyst for solving the misunderstandings between our main couple. Ning Yingying is that character, and I did not see it coming that it was going to be her. I thought it was going to be Shen Qingqiu, but no, it was her. She solved everything. She told Luo Binghe, her and Mingfan, told him everything that had been going on, and made Luo Binghe realize the errors of his ways. I'm floored. I am just baffled, right? So we'll get to this. But yeah, so I like the idea of Shen Qingqiu. I kept thinking back to the Discord image where somebody shared a picture of Shen Qingqiu as a cat. And so when he throws the cat to try to distract everybody, I thought that was hilarious. The only thing that doesn't make sense to me story-wise at this point is why the only thing I can make sense of is why did the Sower, disguised as sect leader, why did they wait until the battle was over and only run to infect Shen Qingqiu whenever he noticed them and they called him out? Like, why did the Sower wait until after the battle was over to infect anybody when there were so many people distracted that the Sower could have infected a bunch of people and that could have been it? And there's a couple reasons why that could be the case. One, it's just a bad writing decision. One, it's just the Sower had to be there and it was a red herring until it wasn't a red herring, and MXTX is like, I didn't know what else to do, so just excuse this little faux pas. You could say that. Two, could it be blamed on the fact that it's Shen Qingqiu's writing and they're kind of a bad writer, so maybe they wrote this in to be the case? But the whole thing of Huayu City seems like it wasn't even part of the original plan anyway. So why is there this random Sower walking around that could be doing damage? What's the deal? 3, could it be that somebody was targeting Shen Qingqiu and wanted to get him infected, and their mission is to like stop Shen Qingqiu from fixing the story? Did the system set this up? Was this an inside job? I don't know. It's either it was just like a little kind of weak writing decision to just have the Sower interact, and maybe it's because Shen Qingqiu is like the main character of the story now, that until Shen Qingqiu directly interacted with it, it didn't do anything. That's the one part about this whole set of chapters that I was like, that doesn't quite add up, but MXTX is good at laying a foundation and then calling back to it, which we'll talk about in this chapter set. So I'm willing to let it go, but it's going to be pinned in the back of my mind like, okay, well, why didn't the Sower do anything until they were called out, especially when it has the power to infect people? We'll see. We'll see. But yeah, so we find out some things about what happens during this battle with the little Palace Mistress. And of course, you know, Shen Qingqiu's like, my face is covered in dirt and whiskers. How could you still recognize me? I have a distinct impression that even though Shen Qingqiu has come back with a giant beard, that Ning Yingying and Ming Fan are going to recognize him. I mean, I think that's foreshadowing that when he does show up around them, they're going to know who he is, because he does still kind of resemble Shen Qingqiu. And again, this is not really spoiling Modao Zushi, because you find this out in the very first chapter of the story, that this definitely seems like it influenced the idea of Wei Wuxian coming back in Mo Jianyu's body. Like, I was like, oh, this is where that notion came from. The peerless cucumber has been reborn from Shen Qingqiu, but he was kind of in the vessel. It's like Shen Yan's soul is just transmigrated from Shen Yan's body to Shen Qingqiu, and now it's in this little zombie mixture body that's who he wants to be. So it's like he's taken shades of Shen Qingqiu that's still there, but he's also himself again, because they describe him as like a listless pretty boy that's had nothing to do. Not too far off from Shen Qingqiu, just with less poise. Peacockness still abound. And I now think that it's gonna be that Luo Binghe is gonna be like kind of Lan Wangji, being like, well, as long as it's you and your soul, I'll still, you know, be able to. But we're gonna talk about this. The doors that this whole plot point is opening. Oh y'all. Oh, I was like MXTX, you are a freaking genius. The reveals. I can't predict where this story is going, because it just takes these turns and you're like, wait, what? And then you're just thrown somewhere new. It's so crazy. So anyway, at this point, MXTX killing off Shen Qingqiu makes total sense, even though it just threw me completely for a loop. And now, let's just talk about the opportunities. We're going to talk about the opportunities that this opens up, right? Because it opens several. For one thing, Shen Qingqiu has a fresh new body. They have a fresh new body with the soul, right? Here was the thing. He not only had without a cure poison, which was not getting cured because he wasn't having sex with Luo Binghe and was not going to for a while, and it was putting him at a disadvantage and making him interact with people that made Luo Binghe jealous. 2, he now had poison from the Sower that was going to have to get cured somehow, and that was going to be a thing. 3, he had maybe he knew all along that the trial wasn't going to happen because he had anticipated on using the mushroom. Maybe that's why a few chapters ago he's like, well, the trial's not going to matter. I'm going to use the mushroom regardless. And so I'm going to transmigrate into that new vessel, so it's going to be fine. Maybe that's what he meant. Damn it. But I wonder if my thing is that he still has the knowledge about Shen Yu that is going to be hidden away somewhere. I feel like that's going to come back at some point. MXTX never reveals a little plot point, even something minute, without calling back to it at some point. So that whole thing where Shen Qingqiu was like, oh, I could probably use that information that I learned about my, you know, Shell's former life to, you know, maybe connect to Luo Binghe or reconcile something. That's going to come back. I'm sure it will. I'm sure at some point I'm going to be like, yep, there it is. But we're going to put it out here now. But no poison. No poison. So that's really good, because that means he doesn't have to rely on a sexual encounter to heal himself. That's off the table. We don't have to rely on any type of sexual encounter to heal. We don't have to worry about the sower. And then, oddly enough, him sacrificing himself, it ends up paying off. It ends up paying off. So, we'll talk about his sacrifice, his sacrifice, and his self-detonation. Which, this is the thing. The OG Shen Qingqiu would never have done that. He never would have self-detonated. He was a scum villain. He would have let Luo Binghe decimate that entire area to save himself. And that's where Shen Qingqiu is not like the original flavor. He would rather spare Luo Binghe the trouble and pain that he's suffering, in addition to spare the lives of all the people that he cares about. And that's where we go to. So we'll talk about that self-detonation here in a minute. But I do have a couple questions. So, in this, the Palace Mistress, let's get this clear. As far as where people are, and I'm going to like put this over here. As far as where people are, the little Palace Mistress, we'll just put LPM here. We don't know her whereabouts. The old Palace Master, he's nowhere to be seen. Hell, Luo Binghe could have killed him for all we know, or he could have stepped down. Gong Yizhao, is he dead? I don't know, because they said the one disciple was dead. They found his body, and they talked about being decayed and poisoned, and then Shen Qingqiu was like, yep, that sounds like something Luo Binghe would have done, which means that when he found the disciple and realized that Shen Qingqiu had gotten away, it sounds like his anger got the better of him and he killed him, which it's like horror movie vibes. But then if he killed Gong Yizhao, I was really at this chapter as it got like closer and closer to self-detonation. I was getting really worried about Luo Binghe because I'm like, Luo Binghe, you're doing some awful things. Like, you're really doing some bad things. Like, killing that disciple because he let your beloved escape is not grounds. It does not equate to you being able and being off, and you should be able to kill him and that be okay. And then if he killed Gong Yizhao, that is a huge thing he's going to have to make up for, because Gong Yizhao didn't do anything wrong. Like, he was just helping. And he, you know, probably challenged Luo Binghe, fearing that he'd violated him. I'm like, if he killed him, I mean, Shen Qingqiu is going to have some words for him, being like, you've got to repent for that. Like, what? I don't know. There's like 20% of me, 25% of me that does believe that Gong Yizhao is alive. He's just maybe like indisposed of at the moment. Maybe. But then the other 75% of me is like, no, Luo Binghe probably killed him because he was enraged and not in his right mind. And so the thing about this self-detonation, self-sacrifice is that it did reveal, it revealed to the other sects how like evil Luo Binghe was acting. And we'll talk about that moment, and I'm sure some people like feel bad for him. I do too. But just because this stuff had happened to him, it's like, that was not an excuse for you to kill those people at all. And Shen Qingqiu calls him out, being like, you can't do that. And so it successfully, and we'll talk about it in more detail, it turns Shen Qingqiu into kind of a martyr. And then it also turns Luo Binghe from being the protagonist to being this villain, to being a scum villain. Like, the story has flipped. Shen Qingqiu is now the one that everybody's like, oh my god, he's sacrificed his life to save his sect. And Luo Binghe is the one acting weird and like a scum villain and hiding Shen Qingqiu's corpse in his castle, trying to get the doctor to bring him back to life. And he's like racked with guilt and anguish. And I feel bad for Luo Binghe in that regard, but it's like, dude, like, he turned on a dime. Like, Ning Yingying had that conversation and he instantly figured out what he'd done and realized he'd done wrong. And I'm like, that's all it took? I'm like, Shen Qingqiu, that's all it took. You should have spoken up sooner. But he didn't want to admit it, and he didn't know how it would affect him. The thing that is so frustrating, of course, is that Shen Qingqiu had died at that moment and his soul had transmigrated to the mushroom. So Shen Qingqiu, at this point, we should make note that he does not know Luo Binghe and Ning Yingying's conversation. He does not know that conversation at all. And the thing about it is, I don't really know why Liu Qingqiu might mention to him if they meet again and be like, yeah, he kind of went and became a recluse after such and such happened. The thing that gets me as to why I think Gong Yizhao is maybe not dead, but again, I'm like 75% sure he is. But the one thing holding off is that Luo Binghe hasn't killed Liu Qingqiu. He hasn't killed him. And I thought he was kind of jealous of him as well with Shen Qingqiu. So if he's not jealous, then if he's not jealous enough to kill Liu Qingqiu, then why did he kill Gong Yizhao? I don't know. Maybe it was because he loaned him a robe and that's a little bit different. I don't know. But I'm so baffled, right? So yeah, so we have this battle. It goes outside. Everybody, like, things were at its possible worst. Like, Shen Qingqiu was a wanted man. All the cultivators were closing in on him. He's like, how do I get out of this? He's poisoned. He can't do anything. He's now infected. What can he do? And people are dying because of him. And he's like, I don't want to be the cause of everyone dying. Gong Yizhao's possibly dead. The pockmarked cultivator is dead. He's like, I don't know what to do. And so he's like, I just need to get out of here. But he's had this plan all along. That bitch. My dog, of course, is like, now I'm giving you this toy to throw. He's had this plan the entire time to make this mushroom go into effect. And it depended upon this sunny day. He had to use the Pokemon move Sunny Day to make it work. But it somehow ended up working. Oh my God. So he gets Liu Qingqiu to come get him. I absolutely love that Liu Qingqiu, he's such like a tsundere. He's like, I don't know. He's like, I'm here. Where do you want to go? Let's go. He doesn't argue with Shen Qingqiu anymore. He's just like, fine, get on, let's go. I think he kind of has come to understand Shen Qingqiu. I love their friendship. I love their dynamic. They very much are like just two friends that are like, okay, fine, man, I'll do what you need. Right? Now, of course, Liu Qingqiu does not approve of Luo Binghe. And that's going to be like the big, my friend doesn't approve of your boyfriend sort of scenario. But this is so fascinating because in Heaven Official's Blessing, there very much was my Shilian's friends not approving of Hua Chong scenario. And here, it's like Shen Qingqiu isn't even aware of why his friend isn't approving of Luo Binghe. Maybe he does. Maybe he understands a little bit. Who knows? But yeah, he's like, you're too reliable. And he's like, get me out of here. And so he gets onto the sword with him. They fly up to the roof. He's like, I need to be on the tallest building of the city. And after that, help me hold off these people. And he's like, what is up with you? He's like, why are you being so troublesome? I like the fact that Liu Qingqiu was like, if you wanted us to break you out, we would have just destroyed the water prison. Like, I love that, like, he's basically suggesting that himself, Yu Qingyan, and others were willing to, like, they were willing to go to war for Shen Qingqiu. They were willing to batter down the hatches, fight for him, go out and get him out of there, bust through the gates. And maybe it's just Liu Qingqiu that was willing to do that. But I'm like, still, that's pretty impressive that you were willing to do that for your friend. I'm like, oh my God, that's so freaking cool. So yeah, but Luo Binghe just shows up. Now, we still have the problem of Jin Mo's recoil. Basically we find out that his recoil, if Luo Binghe uses without control, it's trying to kill him. So it could possibly, get this right, it could destroy the area around them. And Shen Qingqiu's like, that's a very bad thing that we don't want to happen. So we need to stop that and keep that from being the case. But the thing that gets me is that Shen Qingqiu's like, Gong Yizhao is dead. And Luo Binghe goes rigid. And it could be that Luo Binghe went rigid because he was mad that Shen Qingqiu seemed to care so much for Gong Yizhao being dead, but doesn't care for Luo Binghe's state, and he's just being selfish in that moment. Or it could be the fact that he knows that Gong Yizhao is not dead, and he's trying to, like, figure out what to say in response, because Shen Qingqiu seems to have taken a lot of issue and knows that now, and so what can he say? And he's like, you had all of these water prison guards dead, over 100, so I'd be hated and persecuted. Was it worth it? And I was getting so mad at Luo Binghe because I'm like, yes, that deserves an answer. That deserves some reasoning. Like, why did you kill all these people just to frame Shen Qingqiu. He's like, was it worth it? Why are you after me so much? What's the deal? And I was waiting for Luo Binghe to give him an answer, like a reason, like, yes, I killed him because of this or whatever. But all he says is like, well, you won't believe me regardless of what I say. And it's like, well, how do you know until you say something? And he's like, will you come or not? And Shen Qingqiu's like, I'm not just going with you. No, you have to communicate. You have to meet me halfway and explain yourself, or I can't understand. And I'm not just going to go with you all willy-nilly without you explaining yourself. I don't blame Shen Qingqiu for saying no. And so then you have these other people showing up that want Shen Qingqiu too, and Luo Binghe is like, you need to beat it. And Luo Binghe getting madder and madder because he's not getting his way with Shen Qingqiu and he's not being able to reach him is starting to affect the other sects as well. And then being like, it's like the brainwashing is not working anymore, which is fascinating to me, right? So he's like, Liu Qingqiu is like, do what you need to do. I got this. But Luo Binghe, he tries at first not to draw his sword and to use like just his hand and his spiritual energy to fend off against Changlan, which is Liu Qingqiu's sword, which I'm just now realizing again. But it wasn't working. So we established that Luo Binghe, again, thank you, reliable narrator Shen Qingqiu, for now explaining this. I'm like, what the fudge? But we get this idea that, okay, Luo Binghe has two systems, right? His body, so I'm going to draw Luo Binghe with his like, he's going to look like a gingerbread man. He's going to look like the paper doll from Odazushi. So he has two systems in his body. We're going to bisect him here. And one is his spiritual chi. And the other is the demonic. And the demonic chi is tied to Jin Mo, channeling into that. But he can't quite use that. The two systems don't interfere. They typically operate in perfect sync. Like in the OG novel, he was able to perfectly be in sync and control what was going on around him, and that's how he took control of the two realms. But the problem is that he can't use both of his hands now. He's not ambidextrous. He can't draw his sword, so it's making it inconvenient for him to access his demonic chi, and so his killing power is diminished. That in itself makes me suspicious about the whole Gong Yi Zhao instance and about all the water prisoners, because if he's not able, I mean, unless he killed them all and that's when Jinmo acted up, which is what was happening in the dream realm, that could be, and now he can't use it anymore. There's a part of me that feels like there's more to the story that we don't know yet, and that things are so chaotic they couldn't be explained in the moment. And when and if Shen Qingqiu meets up again with Luo Binghe, because we all know what's going to happen, we got 2.5 more volumes to go, then there's going to have to be some explanation. Now the question is, how long is it going to be before Shen Qingqiu meets back up again with Luo Binghe? MXTX has a tendency to not let her couples go on very long without seeing one another. Contrary to what you think would happen. So I don't know. Again, how is Shen Qingqiu? Is he going to immediately be noticed by Luo Binghe? Is Luo Binghe not going to recognize him and think he's somebody else? Is he going to like, are they not going to see each other until volume 4? Is he going to be mad? I don't think he's going to be mad at Shen Qingqiu. I think he's going to be baffled. I think Shen Qingqiu is going to be baffled. And then we got to figure out what to do. But we'll talk more about that when we get there. But he's like, they fought. And then he was at the highest point of the building. And Shen Qingqiu was like, Luo Binghe, don't be rash. And Luo Binghe, when he's like, too late, I'm like, Luo Binghe was being ridiculous. I'm glad he finally let it all out and said what he needed to say to Shen Qingqiu, because now it's basically Luo Binghe has finally aired out what he's thought. So Shen Qingqiu knows. He knows the full story. And what got me when he's like, well, how can this be resolved? You know, why do you think this matter can be settled between us? And I was like, Shen Qingqiu thinks it can be. He's like, why can't it? He's like, this is whenever Luo Binghe was saying his spiel, it hit me that Shen Qingqiu has no choice, because it's like Luo Binghe just gave up. He instantly, all of that time when Shen Qingqiu had been encouraging Luo Binghe to not think about his past and to move forward, it's like all of that was undone so quickly by being put in that abyss. He's like, you know, fate, you know, I was a 4-year-old child being humiliated, no one helped. Was that fate? My mom dying and starving to death. Was that fate? And he's like, you know, you let me fight with dogs for scraps, and then you lied to me, abandoned me, and betrayed me, and shoved me into the place worse than purgatory. Was that fate? And he's like, look at what I've become. Am I strong enough? And that goes back to that whole conversation of him being strong enough for Shizun. And Shen Qingqiu's like, what do I say? He's like, I didn't want to do this. But he doesn't get a chance to really, he realizes, he's like, everything I was afraid of ended up coming true. I was afraid of you becoming this protagonist that just hated me and wanted to kill me. And you've proven that that's exactly what happened. And so, but I think that Shen Qingqiu, I'm like, did you pay attention to some of Luo Binghe's words there? Because he kind of confessed to you, where he said, my mind has only thought of Shizun, and I wondered why you would do this and why you'd refuse to give me a chance to explain or plead my case. And I'm like, well, Shen Qingqiu did give you a chance to do that, but you didn't do it. He gave you the chance to answer, why didn't you come back? And you wouldn't do it. So it's like, that's not the Luo Binghe, he completely lets his emotions override the logic that's been presented in front of him. And yeah, Shen Qingqiu didn't explain himself, which he should have. But he also did ask for you to explain yourself, and you wouldn't do it either. So it's like, it was a bad street both ways. It was a dead end both ways. And then he's like, I finally understood. None of that's important. Just do what I want. Fate either never existed, or I should trample it beneath my feet. Now, Luo Binghe does have this idea about trampling fate. And he's kind of become the villain in this case. So we're going to talk about that here in a second. But the scorching sun overhead, I love that it gives Shen Qingqiu tears in his eyes. He's like, okay, we can use the mushroom now. That whole description of the sunlight making the city look like gold. And Shen Qingqiu is like, he turned his gaze away from the sky and had tears in his vision. And he said, even though he'd had no choice, he was responsible for Luo Binghe being this way. He'd become a dark young man who only thought of revenge on society. And Shen Qingqiu had wanted to stop him, but everything he'd done had not only failed, but it etched that hatred even deeper. He's like, I tried to do good, and it just made it worse. And I don't know if the system's whole idea was for it to get to this point. I don't know if the system intended for Shen Qingqiu to figure out about the mushroom. That's the thing. I don't know if the system intended for Shen Qingqiu to figure out the mushroom cheat code. I don't know if it intended that. I don't know if it had this in mind or had this planned out. It doesn't seem likely, but who knows? The system's being very quiet at this point, and we don't know. And then, so Shen Qingqiu's like, well, it was my fault. He's like, I tried everything I could, and it ended up not mattering in the end. And what gets me is that Shen Qingqiu, he doesn't argue with them. He's like, how can I argue? He's like, I am responsible for this, and you have every right to hate me and to want to trample fate because of what I've done. I didn't talk to you when I should have. He's like, I just have failed you. And it's so sad. And then Luo Binghe, he like for a second startles, like he doesn't know what to do. And then Jin Mo takes that opportunity to try to kill him. And Shen Qingqiu is like, hey, don't let it overpower your mind. But that just makes Luo Binghe even more confused, because he's like, well, why is this guy that I just yelled at and said was his fault of everything being bad is trying to comfort me? He's like, that doesn't make any sense. He's like, I thought you hated me. What's going on? And then that leads Jin Mo to surge again. And at that moment, Shen Qingqiu's like, okay, I got to do this. We're going to use the mushroom. It's within a week. Because at first, when he first like did the self-detonation, I was like, but you didn't get a chance to use the mushroom. I was like, but the mushroom's wasted now. No. It basically was Shang Qinghua telling him, saying, hey, I know you had planned on longer to wait until you use the mushroom, but you're going to have to use it within the week. You got to transplant your soul into that corpse, or it's just going to start to rot. So that does bring about the question, The snake human monster in the lake. What was that? Was that someone? Was that a body for someone else? Was that another vessel? What? We don't know! I'm like, does the snake human body, does that have some kind of special importance now? Are we gonna go back to that MXTX? We might. She might decide to do that later on. Who knows? But yeah, he self-detonates, which just means he just explodes his entire soul out of his body and uses that to calm Jinmo. And then he says, for all that passed, I repay you today. Being like, I'm sacrificing myself. Think of it as me doing one good thing at the end. I'm doing one good thing to spare you. And then he dies. So everything after this moment, when he topples back, he doesn't know what happened. So he doesn't know about the conversation between Ning Yingying. And just the idea of Luo Binghe sitting there holding this corpse of Shen Qingqiu as Ning Yingying, like, and Mingfan scold him, would never have imagined. I would have never have imagined. I was like, oh my God, this is totally different from the OG. Not only is Mingfan still alive, but Ning Yingying went from being this cowardly little meek girl just fawning after Luo Binghe to telling him off and being like, what's wrong with you? Why are you being this way? And my only thing was, girl, I'm glad you said all this to him, but I wish Shen Qingqiu had said it instead because it's a little too late, you know? And then Liu Mingyan says, you know, I can't defeat him. We can't defeat him. He's the protagonist. He has the power to not die, so we can't defeat him. And Luo Binghe is just sitting there at a loss holding his body like, what have I done? What has happened? And Mingfan being like, stop calling him Shizun. I'm like, when they both tell him to stop calling him Shizun, I wonder if in the future chapters he won't. When he sees Shen Qingqiu, he'll call him by his name. I don't know. I feel like that's gonna be, that's the Lion King. You've crossed the log bridge. You now have to grow up. He's not your Shizun anymore. He's gonna be your contemporary. Or are you just calling him Peerless Cucumber? But yeah, she's like, Shizun would rather be infected than see us taken advantage of or bullied. And yet you'd throw your life away so easily. And then they basically tell Luo Binghe everything that had happened. How he was heartbroken, everything that he'd done, all the kind things that he'd done. They just basically immortalize Shen Qingqiu's sacrifice. And they make Luo Binghe look like an asshole. And Liu Mingyan's like, well, he didn't kill him, but he's responsible for his death. I was like, oh my God. I don't know if Shen Qingqiu realizes that everyone is viewing Luo Binghe as the villain now because of what he's done. So now, is the quest going to be to save Luo Binghe? The self-saving system? Is it going to be now that Shen Qingqiu has to unite the kingdoms together? He has to unite the sects back together. He has to help Luo Binghe not be the villain. He has to, and possibly reveal who is the main culprit. Or at least, if there's not a main culprit, reveal all of the false information that has led to his life and Luo Binghe's life being a mess. Maybe, possibly, but yeah, I mean, we have missions now. Saving Luo Binghe and getting them together and figuring out how to move forward is going to be a big thing in the series now. We have 2.5 volumes to go with it, but I have no clue where it's going. None. Not a trace. And Shen Qingqiu, as we know, is, as far as we know, in the demon realm. Is he, I mean, he put the mushroom at the Borderlands, but why is he in the demon realm? It seems maybe suspicious. I don't know. Maybe he's hiding out there. I don't know. Maybe he's getting with Mobe June. I don't know. I don't know. We'll see. And that's when Luo Binghe, he's like, I don't want you to repay me. I couldn't get over my anger. I couldn't get over it. When you saw me, you acted like a ghost, and I didn't know why. He's like, you kept suspecting me of everything. And I was like, and he's like, but I was wrong. Yeah. And he's like, and he still thinks that Shen Qingqiu disdained him for being a demon. And he was like, I was afraid if I returned, you'd throw me out. I thought if I took over Huanhua Palace and became like you, I could make you happy. He done goofed. And at that moment, Luo Binghe knew he fucked up. Basically, this is that Beauty and the Beast moment. This is the moment the Beast realized he messed up. He's like, I've done something horrible, and I didn't take it the right way, and I didn't do the right things, and we didn't get a chance to talk it out, and I shunned him away from being able to talk to me, and I've done these horrible things. He's like, I messed up. And maybe the system knew that this had to happen. Maybe the system's like, Shen Qingqiu, you're gonna have to go through the ringer, and you may have to kill yourself to make Luo Binghe realize what's gone down. I'm baffled. I'm baffled, y'all. I'm baffled. Yep. So then we get the Borderlands, which this chapter is really cool. This chapter gave me lots of Trigun feels. I don't know if you've ever watched the anime or read the manga Trigun. You should. It's great. But this gave me very like the Borderlands, like the crossing between the demon and human realms where nobody wants to hang between. It also gave me very much kind of like when they talk about in Heaven Official's Blessing, the parade of ghosts, where there's like there's a division between the human and ghost realm in that series, and the ghosts kind of go in and out. They're ghosts, not demons, but they kind of go in and out. And it was giving me those vibes. Very much seemed like crossing the border. Makes sense nobody wants to live there because you don't know what demons are crossing over into the human realm. So yeah, makes sense. It felt very much like a Western. This whole front of it felt like there were tumbleweeds in the background, and like you could see Shen Qingqiu coming in with a poncho and spurs and a cowboy hat. Like I was just waiting for that to happen. My Western mind went there, right? But also, speaking of Modao Zushi, and this is from the very beginning, the first chapter, so it's not really spoilers. But in the first chapter, it starts out with gossip and explaining the plot. And it's been 5 years. So, if Luo Binghe was, 18 or 19 over the course of, or in his like late teens, early 20s back, 5 years ago, he's now in his mid 20s. So things have changed. People have grown up, right? But 5 years have passed. I think that it's very important to note that because originally you had Luo Binghe originally in the Abyss for 5 years, and now you have Shen Qingqiu as the mushroom in the Borderlands for 5 years. So it's kind of like, is Shen Qingqiu coming out as the character with the golden finger now? Is the story shifting? We just have to wait and see, right? Just have to wait and see. But yeah, I do like, the only thing that was confusing about this translation is that there were 2 newcomers in this first. I had to go back and reread this section. Also, the picture for this week is great. And it's of Shen Qingqiu saving, let me get this right, where you all can see it. It's of Shen Qingqiu saving Luo Binghe. And like the Mengmo, the stuff all around him, kind of like he's doing here. The same ennui, the same. This is basically, the cover is spoiling this part of the chapter for us, and I didn't realize it. Yep. That's exactly what happens. Look at that. But that's the only picture we get for this one. The only thing that was slightly confusing, and I had to go back and read it in this version to like let it soak in, is that there's a newcomer at the beginning that's just asking what's been going on. And they basically explain, well, things have been bad. The Sangjiang Mountain sect, they don't like the Huanhua Palace. The old Palace Masters disappeared. Luo Binghe's taken over. He's basically obsessed with bringing Shen Qingqiu back from the dead. He even kidnapped the doctor to try to like bring him back from the dead. Everybody's all kind of like at each other's throats. There's a lot of tension still, even after 5 years. Liu Mingyan can't defeat him in battle, but he keeps fighting him. It's like they just can't beat him. And then he says, what does it say there? Only a few days later, they kidnapped Mu Qingfang to try to get him to bring him back. But he'd been dead for so long, there was no point. So Luo Binghe has basically been shut up in Huanghua Palace, lamenting and mourning his days without Shen Qingqiu, his Shizun that he effectively killed. And he's basically tries to kill anybody that comes to comfort him. Awesome. So they're like, with everybody feuding and things being really tense, he's like, I don't mind going to the border. to go here. I like Liu. I like that they're here to kind of be the little narrator of what's been happening the last 5 years. So the thing that was confusing was at the beginning, there was a newcomer asking about what was going on, but then the demonic presence comes in to try to hurt them. And that's when Shen Qingqiu shows up as the other newcomer to battle and destroy the demon and save them. So it was a little confusing at first. Now, Liu is like, he almost explains why he thinks what he thinks the real deal is. He's like, one theory is that it was a grudge, but I think that, and I think he was going to say, I think that they loved each other and it was just a misunderstanding. I don't know. We won't know. But I love MXTX using the gossip and the rumors of others to kind of give us some exposition to the story, especially since it's been 5 years. I also loved the tension of when they were like, light the lamps. And like, you could just picture everything in your mind of this all going down. It was so good. So good. But Shen Qingqiu has come and he has a beard asking what year it is. And I love that MXTX just casually goes from this mysterious figure showing up with a beard asking what year it is to suddenly saying, so here's how Shen Qingqiu didn't die. And you're like, what? Wait, MXTX, you gotta give my neck a little time to heal after that whiplash. Seriously. The fudge. So they were like, well, why fake a death? It's not gonna work. It's like, it's a trope tried and true. So let's just die for real. And I'm like, oh my God. I thought before we got the explanation of the flesh mushroom, before we got that explanation, I thought that Shen Qingqiu had actually died, but was going to be transmigrated into another character's body. And that even more time was going to pass. And that Luo Binghe was going to be a lot older. I thought we were going to like flip it to where Luo Binghe was the older person and Shen Qingqiu was the younger person. We were flipping the age tropes. That's not exactly how it went down, but I thought, for example, he was going to get transmigrated into the shell of a younger character that's new, which is kind of what happens, except they cultivated this one themselves. So Shen Qingqiu, he was like, by only facing death can you return alive. So this flesh mushroom, they're like, it's not really useful, but it creates a vessel. It basically grows up into a vessel for a soul, which is not very helpful unless you get into this situation. Plant a little Shen in the spring, harvest a big Shen in the autumn. And here we are. But it's like, it's not something you can just simply grow. He's like, he destroyed a number of mushroom sprouts before he cultivated one that hadn't grown crooked. So they've been trying this for a while, for like 3 years. And they finally got one that was good enough. And Shen Qingqiu calculated the coordinates to carry out this long distance operation. So they created this triangle, right? It's an equilateral triangle, which means that it has equal sides, right? It's like that. So they say that there's 3 locations, 3 arrays. So basically, beneath the tallest building of the Huayu city, there had been a transportation array. And at the time when the sun was the highest, so that's why he was saying earlier in the other chapters, he's like, if it's not sunny, this is not going to work. And it's like, so at the tallest of the Huayu city building, they had a transportation array, right? So it was dependent upon that. Okay. And so then he triggered a second array there for activation on Kangzhong Mountain. So he basically did that. And the moment that Shen Qingqiu's soul left his body, he was sent into the mature dew mushroom, which had been buried deep in the mountain of the Borderlands. So it's like, he basically signified to Chang Xinghua to get ready for the Borderlands, and then his soul was going to be there. Easy peasy stuff, right? But the only flaw was that the great master airplane shooting towards the sky was too reliable. He'd been worried about flaws like overlarge arms or uneven legs, or a crucial part simply not growing, which basically is his penis, but none of them had occurred. However, sure enough, using the fertilizer had resulted in some side effects. So the side effects, I'm wondering if the side effects not only are the idea that he can now generate spiritual energy, and he's like a generator for it, if that's it, but I wonder if this miracle grow assisted him in other ways. We'll see. We'll see. But yeah. Yep, only did he break through the surface. He like comes out like a zombie breaking through the surface. And he's like, my body isn't listening to my commands again. And this left him splayed on the mountainside. I like, again, this is really a little bit to Xilian. Xilian tumbling down the mountains. Shen Qingqiu like crawling down the mountains because his limbs aren't working correctly. And he finally has to get to where he's not a robot. He can use his body. Oh my gosh. But I like that he says that when he tried to shave his beard, he realizes that like he's 40% looks pretty much like Shen Qingqiu. And he's like, that's a little too much. I'm going to put this beard back on here so people don't instantly recognize me. But it had already been 5 years. Now, where Shen Qingqiu is in the demon realm and why he's hiding out there and not just awaiting Shen Qingqiu's return, I don't know. Seems a little suspicious, but he did help Shen Qingqiu get back, so I guess maybe he's not too suspicious. I just want to know what he's doing in the demon realm. We didn't get a lot of Shen Qingqiu at all this chapter set or the last one, so I'm like, I'm a little bit concerned with what he's doing, but I guess we'll find out when we get there. But yeah, so he's basically like a generator now. I'm assuming maybe because of the fertilizer or because he sacrificed himself to go into this body. I don't know. So he's like, am I ascending to OP-hood? He could be. It could be that Shen Qingqiu is the one that after 5 years of cultivating in the earth, he's come back with the golden finger. Maybe. That'd be a twist, right? The idea that you did a good deed and that even after all your persecution, your good deed paid off. And it was like a self-sacrificing, he's like, I've got to, and honestly, you can say, well, he sacrificed himself to be reborn in the body because he had to. Sure. But he also didn't necessarily have to do it in that moment, but he saved all those people and helped Luo Binghe in the process of it. So it's like, he was selfless in that moment doing it. So he almost says his name to Liu, but instead he says Peerless Cucumber, which they all get wrong and say Peerless Chrysanthemum, Peerless Crown, Peerless Crazy Flower. No. He's like, maybe I should switch to a different name. But then I like that he stumbles across these like hillbilly demons. Again, you talk about Shen Qingqiu rising up from the ranks. So you have Shen Qingqiu that is nice to this pack of demons, and they all seem to side with him. And now you have like slowly Shen Qingqiu is getting everybody to side with him. And it's like, do you realize what's happening? Because he comes across these hillbilly demons. He's like, well, what's your name? It's like, I'm named Six Balls. We don't eat rotten flesh. My Paul says only the rich and influential can afford flesh. And I'm like, enough. I just love these demons all have terrible names. He's like, what is happening? They don't have the really pretty names that the other demons have that are from higher lineage. And then, of course, he talks about Luo Binghe being like, well, he'd be called the jade-faced little playboy or evil demonic incubus spirit. And he's like, oh, no, it'd be something even more terrifying. It reminded me of, like, Lo Heavenly Pillar because he has supposedly a giant penis. I was like, Shen Qingqiu, do you realize what you're doing? Do you realize? It's like Alyssa Edwards in All-Star 2s where she's, like, trying to make up jokes. She's like, oh, my gosh, she just can't. And Detox is over there like, what? Shen Qingqiu laughing about giving Luo Binghe a nickname based on his giant penis that's called a heavenly pillar. I about laughed. I'd spit that up my nose. It's just ridiculous. Now, real quick, that reminds me, back when Ning Yingying was letting into Luo Binghe and being like, what have you done? I thought she was going to mention the jade pendant, but instead she pointed out, because they saw in the tavern, they saw Shen Qingqiu use the leaves to knock out and expose the Sower. So I thought, it was really clever that she was like, hey, back then when you were getting bullied on, who stopped the bullies? Shen Qingqiu did, because we just saw him do the same move in the tavern. Now, whether Luo Binghe remembers that and asks him about it, and that leads to him giving the jade pendant back to him, because now it's like, well, what about the anger points? What about the heartbreak? I mean, the heartbreak points are probably still there, but what about the anger points? What about the satisfaction points? Are these systems this whole reincarnation into the sun, moon, dew mushroom has completely, like, are the systems even valid anymore? With the fog of misunderstanding, is it even a thing? Are there going to be B points anymore? Are there going to be satisfaction and character depth points? Like, we don't know. How is the system going to realign itself based on this plot development? We don't know. So I'm like, it's such a loss. And right now the system's not even in the equation anymore. It may never be in the equation anymore. Now that the story's been completely rewritten, it may be, okay, Scum villain self-saving system, it's up to you now. We'll just have to wait and see. So yeah, so then Shen Qingqiu, he's like, oh, I'm getting carried away I'm using the great master protagonist to come up with these dirty jokes. He's like, I'm acting too much like Shen Qingqiu. He's like, instead, he finds out that Liu Mingyan's sword tassel, which is supposed to be exchanged when you like somebody, has been found by one of these demons. And he's like, well, she wouldn't just drop it. It has a pretty big significance. So he's like, well, do you know what demon? Where'd you find it? And they're like, oh, well, we found it from an important person traveling around, sending their subordinates to clear the way. And of course, Shen Qingqiu thinks it's Luo Binghe, because that he still thinks somehow, against all odds, I'm like, Shen Qingqiu, the OG Luo Binghe is nowhere in sight at this point. But you still think that it's a possibility, because that's all he knows. And as far as he knows, he just died and saved everybody, but Luo Binghe still hated him and continued on doing what he did in the original novel. So as far as he knows, that's what he thinks is happening, but that's not the case, right? So as far as Shen Qingqiu knows, he still thinks that Luo Binghe is the same. Whereas everybody else in the story at this point knows that he's not. Now Shen Qingqiu's just going to have to figure it out for himself, right? And so I like that the six balls, he blushes, and Shen Qingqiu believes that he's blushing because it's Luo Binghe. But no, it's not. It's not him. It's because of Sha Hualing. And so he says the system seemingly isn't able to threaten him for now, so he might as well go check it out. And goes to the rift between the boundaries. The fact that Liu Qingqiu took on a disciple because it was Shen Qingqiu's suggestion, that just touches my heart. I love that so much. The fact that now in this new version, Luo Qingqiu has a disciple, and it's Yishan. That's so sweet. I thought that was so sweet. And Shen Qingqiu being like, really? Liu Qingqiu took on a disciple? He said he would never do that. And it's like, that's because you influenced him to do it. It's because you influenced him. And he wanted to, like, honor your memory by taking on a disciple. I thought that was so cute. So Sha Hualing, she's just gotten older and bustier and curvier, but she's still the same old personality. I can't wait to see the little Palace Mistress, if she's still around. But basically, she's still doing her dastardly deeds. And so she's like, basically, Shen Qingqiu, he gets a fan. I love that the first thing he had to do was get new clothes and a fan. He's like, it's because it's my character. I have to have my fan, please. I told Discord, I was like, I've ordered a fan, a Shen Qingqiu fan, which I'm glad I've ordered it now because it feels appropriate. It's supposed to be here by the end of the month, so I don't know if it'll be volume 3 before I get it or if I'll be able to get through this and have it before then. I don't know yet. But I love the idea that Shen Qingqiu channels spiritual energy and makes a blade out of his fan. Because, yeah, we also have to establish that Zhu Ya is no more. Zhu Ya was destroyed. The sword was destroyed. And now his fan is a sword. Which is freaking badass and cool. I like that. So Zhu Ya was no more. It got destroyed during the blast. Because his... technically, Zhu Ya, which is tied to Shen Qingqiu, is gone. So, and I wonder if that's going to make things complicated because everybody's going to be like, well, your sword broke, so your body's all... And he's like, well, but... Shen Qingqiu is pretty necessary for this whole thing because Shen Qingqiu needs to tell everybody that, no, we co-inspired and used the sun, moon, dew mushroom to make this happen. But how are they going to do that? How's that going to work? So, also... the names and the nomenclature, it is like a tongue twister reading this story because it's like the sun, moon, dew, mushroom. Ning Yingying, Chen Qingqiu. It's just like such tongue twisters. MXTX knows exactly what they're doing. But yeah, Yang Yizhan, bless his heart. And they call Luo Binghe the little beast. A demon fiend. And then, yeah, little beast, demon fiend, ingrate, that bastard. And so then Yang Yizhan, he was like, well, he's like, that demon woman, she like unclothed herself and like, you know, tried to tempt me. It felt like Sir Galahad in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, where he goes to the Castle Anthrax, and they're like, we're but 100 schoolgirls, schoolgirl virgins. And then by the end, he's like, oh, well, it'd be better if I stay. And Lancelot's like, back, foul demons. It's so good. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, great. But yeah, Shen Qingqiu's like, well, you just can't let a woman strip clothes and tempt you. Now, come on now. He's like, avoiding feminine charms doesn't mean fearing them. He's like, you shouldn't be afraid when a woman does that. You should be proud and like stand up for yourself and know that you're stronger than that. That you have a strong constitution. And he's like, just think of Liu Mingyan and how your master fought off hundreds of succubi. And for Shen Qingqiu to say that, mind you, he's like, he suspected Liu Mingyan was asexual or impotent. I'm like, you weren't at all tempted by those ladies either, sir. You're pot calling the kettle black, am I right? Maybe Liu Mingyan is asexual, or maybe he's gay. Who knows? But I'm like, that same could be said to you, Shen Qingqiu. I was like, oh. Of course, Yang Yizhan was like, an entire cave, he fought them off, that as expected of Shizun. And I'm like, He's like, well, how do you know him? And he's like, oh, old affairs. That's how we know. Old affairs. That's just how we know each other. So then we find out that Sha Hualing has captured Liu Mingyan. So they're going to go find her and set her free. Obviously, Liu Mingyan and Yang Yizhan is probably going to tell Liu Mingyan about this encounter. They will probably figure out. I bet Liu Mingyan would be suspicious it's Shen Qingqiu somehow. He's like, well, if Luo Binghe came back for the dead, why not his bow, huh? Why not? And so we have this idea that Luo Binghe, something has gone wrong. The fact that she would capture Sangzhong Mountain sect disciples with such a high-profile manner could only mean one thing. Something's gone wrong with Luo Binghe. Well, yeah, Luo Binghe at this point is not working with the demon realm. He's not trying to take over the other realms. He's stuck in that Huanhua Palace mourning your death, sir. With his black robes and everything. He's probably got the little palace mistress scrubbing the floors for penance. And he's like, the cultivation system was unscientific in the extreme. He had to multitask and coordinate two systems within him in order to combine diametrically opposed forces into a working network. Meaning his spiritual and demonic ki, or chi, had to operate as mutual checks and balances. But when Jinmo was involved, the demonic chi surged and the balance was lost, throwing the whole into disarray. So again, our big mission overall at this point is we've got to get Jinmo under control. Because Jinmo taking over Luo Binghe and exploiting his anger and using him as a catalyst and as a vessel itself is a problem because it could destroy a lot of things and kill a lot of people. And Shen Qingqiu's like, we don't need that. But now Shen Qingqiu's like, well, now we have other things. We have to unite the sects back together and get them all working again. We need to solve this. Luo Binghe and I need to come together and let bygones be bygones. I've got to help Luo Binghe improve his reputation again and do that. And we have to reveal, is there a main culprit or is it just the misunderstandings between the two of them? I'm so curious at this point because I talked several chapters back about usually MXTX has like a secret villain in this. At this point, the secret villain to me would be Shen Qingqiu because he's the author and he's written this terrible story that Shen Qingqiu has to fix. But Shen Qingqiu is also working with Shen Qingqiu, so I don't know what we're going to do with that. But I've also talked over an hour just about these chapters. Oh my god. I thought I knew what was going on and how things were going to go in Volume 1. And then at the end of Volume 1, we got the reveal of airplane shooting towards the sky, and it completely, like, blank slate cut everything. We haven't even made it through halfway of Volume 2, And I'm already back to square one. And we still have 3 more weeks with this volume, and then volumes 3 and 4. It's any man's game at this point. So yeah, next week we're going to be looking at chapters 46, 47, and 48. I definitely want to look at the chapter titles for this week. Excuse me. So we're going to look up chapter titles for 43, 44, and 45 real quick, because I am beyond curious, right? Beyond curious. Let me look this up real quick. So, the pinned messages here. Chapters 43 was, the protagonist dies! Everything ends! What if you read that chapter title and then went, what? But the protagonist dies. Meaning Shen Qingqiu is the protagonist, not Luo Binghe. And everything ends being like, yeah, everything that had been going on against Shen Qingqiu that had hurt him is over now. He has a chance to start over. Truly start over. Like, he was starting over as Shen Qingqiu in volume 1, but we saw that because of everything that Shen Qingqiu, all the baggage he had from before, everything that Shen Yan was trying to do to save himself and to make it better was just not, it wasn't working. In the end, there had been so much bad happen, he couldn't right that wrong. And the system made him go through with an act that pushed Luo Binghe to end up where he was going to end up anyway. So yeah, everything had to end and start fresh. Chapter 44 was called Manual Rebirth. That was so spoilery too. How dare? Oh my God. And then chapter 45 is called Demon Culture, which is, we get the idea of the demons liking trinkets, but one man's trash is another one's treasure, and we get all of that. So, oh my gosh. Well, I'm glad that I'm not reading these chapters. I'm glad I'm not seeing the chapter titles before the chapters themselves, because those would have spoiled quite a bit. But yeah, we're going to be looking at chapters 46 through 48 next week. It's not as long of a section, but I've talked for, this whole video is probably like 2 hours and 40 minutes at this point. So maybe that won't be a bad thing. I need to cool down after that. So, oh my God. I don't know where we're going to from here. We're gonna rescue Mingyan, presumably. After that, no clue. None whatsoever. But that encouraged me to keep reading because I want to be surprised. And surprised, your girl was. So, in any case, I'm excited to hear your comments down below. I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back real soon with more of Scum Villain's self-saving system. Bye.